Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt. I'm chairing the panel today. Joining me on the panel are Diane and Ron Merritt. The secretary to the board is Jason Robertson, and our assessor is Nathan Kupfer. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note, you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for a revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested are described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that would be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on our docket today. Mr. Robertson, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Nathan Kupfer.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Lyle Rock.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kupfer, and good afternoon, Mr. Rock. The first item on our agenda today, there's no civic address, but it is file number 223723. Mr. Kupfer, when you're ready, please.
That would be roll number 1305277800. As you pointed out, there's no street address for this property. It's a commercial surface parking lot located on the corner of Cumberland and Hargrave, just south of Notre Dame Avenue. The land area is 12,000 square feet, and we have 40 parking stalls reported in our system here. Although I would note that the income and expense mailer we received, I believe, reports 42, so that's a small discrepancy. Regardless, we're appraising this property on land value, so that's what's deriving that $817,000 2023 assessment that I'll be recommending be maintained today. Going to page 2 of my brief, we can see that we have no recent sales of the property, and I've included some photographs, including an overhead and a street view, so you can get a view of and an idea of what we're looking at here for a parking lot. I've included 10 land sale comparables here from the downtown area and the exchange area, approximating the subject as best we can. I've noted here that the subject property at 12,000 square feet is being assessed at $68.08. Got that just at the bottom of the land sales comparable there, which we put it at the low end of this comparables chart. That makes sense to me, as I think the location of this property is probably on the inferior end relative to this comparables list. So that's the information that we have. We're going based off of land value. I've attached the income and expense information for your reference, which shows some of the vacancy, the rents, and the parking stalls. But at this time, we are going to recommend that 2023 assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Rack, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. So could you go down to page 10, the COVID questionnaire? So would you agree that by this COVID questionnaire, since it's a parking lot, and in 2020 and 2021 with the COVID, that a lot of people were working from home and therefore not parking their cars, and that the lot was impacted by COVID as far as renting spaces?
Based on the income and expense mailer, they note moderate impacts. And as of the reference date, April 1, 2021, yes, some people downtown were working from home.
Okay. And would you agree that parking lots, like you're using a lot of parking lot sales, would you agree that parking lots are valued and sold based on the income they generate?
No, not necessarily.
And then what would they be based on as far as valuation?
I would say development potential and land value.
Well, if it's a parking lot and it's land value, again, would you not agree that the actual generated income, because some of your comparables were sold as parking lots and are parking lots today? So would you not agree that there must be some component of, when it comes to valuation and sale prices, of what the valuation is based on the income they generate, since they were bought as parking lots and they continue in parking lots? Would you not agree?
In some cases, that could certainly be the case. In other cases, I would say they were probably purchased for their land value and development potential.
Okay. But you agree that location basically dictates, well, you kind of mentioned that location kind of dictates what can be charged for a parking lot and the value of a parking lot?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, would you agree that if a parking lot has hourly parking, evening parking, weekend rates, in addition to just basically parking during the day, that it would generate more income and therefore it'd be worth more?
I would say that whoever is managing the parking for the space has organized it in whichever way is going to be maximally productive towards them and their business.
So then, therefore, you agree with that statement?
I would say that they're running the business, to my knowledge, as efficiently as they can, which appears to include month-to-month leases.
Well, again, you really haven't answered the question. I'm saying that basically if you have hourly parking, if you've got basic parking during the day and the tenants, a lot of these parking lots, the tenants have to leave by 5 o'clock. Then you add in the same lots, hourly parking, and then you have evening parking and weekend rates. So it just makes sense. Would you not agree that you could generate more income if you have that type of parking?
You could hypothetically generate more income with that type of parking and full vacancy. But again, I would stress that whoever is managing the parking lot is doing so to generate as much money as they can off of it, and are likely doing so in the way that's most beneficial to them.
Okay, and your comparables are like around 2.5 years old or older. Some are, you've got two from 2015. Would it be safe to say that you have no lot sales for 2020 and 2021? Because perhaps due to COVID, they'd be worth less, that people aren't using them. If you basically value them by the income approach, and maybe because of that, nobody sold parking lots during 2020 and 2021?
I don't have any evidence to suggest that sales decreased in 2020. Obviously, we wouldn't include anything after April 1, 2021. In general, I would say land transactions are a bit of a scarcity, and I've included the best available comparables at our disposal.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions of the assessor?
Yes, I do. Mr. Kupfer, this particular subject property is operated as a parking lot right now?
Correct.
Okay. So did you not look at the income approach in regards to the evaluation?
We do. So what happens is our model will produce two values, one using the income approach and one using the cost approach or cost land approach in this case. And we'll select what is effectively the highest and best use, or whatever higher value the model is producing will become the default. So in this case, the model value using the land per dollar of $68.08 came to a higher value than the income that was generated by the model. So this is the value that gets defaulted to.
I thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do. So on the COVID questionnaire on pages 9, 10, and 11, on page 9, I think it is, no, maybe 8. Page 8, they say they had 14 vacancies, but all the other spots stayed as month to month. And then on page, they said rents were deferred. So do we know if those 14 spots that weren't paid for in 2020 were deferred to 2021?
Well, it's a good question, and they don't say specifically. As you pointed out, they've got their 14 vacancies listed on the tenant information form. Everything is listed still as month to month. I would suggest generally if you have 14 vacancies, you would consider other options, potentially not month to month, potentially other options to get those filled and generate something off the site. But as of the 2020 income and expense mailer, what's been submitted, this is the best available information.
Okay. I just didn't know if you knew anything further than what was written because of the moderate impact. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I have some questions also. Mr. Kupfer, in the previous assessment, was it assessed on the basis of land or income?
I do not have that information available, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
No, that's quite all right. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Okay, I'm looking at your photo. I think it's page 3. I'm sorry, I'm operating from my iPad and it's not as nice.
Yeah.
This is a fairly rectangular, regular shaped lot.
Yes.
Is there access from where? What is that street?
The access points, I believe, would be Cumberland.
Uh-huh.
You're looking at the corner of Hargrave and Cumberland in this photo here.
Yes.
And then Notre Dame is just north of us. So I don't see an access point there on what would be Hargrave. I would assume it would be on the other side there on Cumberland, but I could be mistaken.
Okay. Do you have what the dimensions of this property are?
You can see on my page 2 that it is in fact a rectangular lot at 12,000 square feet.
Okay.
Give me a minute, I could pull it up, but again, it looks to be fairly standard.
Yeah, I was just wondering, a lot of this size, would it be developable in your opinion for various uses?
In my opinion, 12,000 square feet is a great size for a development project. It falls in line with the land size my comparisons here, where I think the small end are closer to 6, and then we have plenty that are about double that as well. I haven't seen anything to suggest that it's not developable. Generally speaking, these parking lots make for very good investment properties. They're low maintenance, low expense, low risk. You hire a parking company to run the business for you, and then the land appreciates over time as it's downtown, big chunk of land. So that appears to be the case here.
Okay, and the downtown living zoning, what does it allow for?
What would it allow for development?
Yeah.
So this is, D, downtown living. I would suggest that for multifamily use, multifamily development would likely be a consideration in this case.
Okay, commercial also?
Could very well be. It looks like it's surrounded by commercial and apartment style buildings, so I don't really see a good reason why they wouldn't.
Okay.
Again, very generally speaking, it's not a desirable thing to have a surplus of surface parking lots in your downtown if you're the city of Winnipeg. Rather than having 5 surface parking lots, you'd rather have 1 5-story parkade and then 4 other developed properties, right? That's how you increase your tax base, increase your downtown, build things up. So I would suggest that this is a developable property.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Rack, when you're ready, you can proceed with your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you. So go to page 1. Again, you can see a picture of the parking lot. Page 1 has the assessment department website information. Page 2 is you'll see that the income for the property, and it was a low income. Expenses are pretty well average. I think they run about 43%, which is pretty average for a parking lot. If you go to page 3, you will see the income, and there were 14 vacancies. In other words, nobody was renting the spots. Now, I want to point out the rents. Like the rents at 65, 75, and 80 are basically they are subsidized. So in other words, they're lower than market because the owner has 3 old buildings, 1 on Princess close to the lot, and 2 on Donald. So he bought this lot in order to rent out space in his buildings, and there was no parking for the building. So he bought this lot so the tenants had somewhere to park. That's what helped him rent out those spaces. So you're looking at market rents, and I know this parking lot because I've dealt with this parking lot for over a decade, and I had conversed with him about the spots. So that's how I know that. The market spots that are rented and are not occupied by any of the buildings would be the 15 spots at 90, 4 spots at 100, and 1 spot at 120. And again, that year, due to COVID, basically there's 14 vacancies in that spot. And this lot typically has vacancies all the time due to its location, the fact that there are no plugs, and the other fact is that it's a gravel lot, so it's a dusty lot. And it's on the fringes of downtown, so basically that's why the rents are low. And if you look in the assessed picture, you'll see there's a couple of lots that are paved basically adjacent to the subject property. So for my valuation, I adjusted the management from 1550 to 2520, and that's based on the lot being full at 5% of the gross. So you're looking at the basically the biggest expense is the property taxes. We're getting $23,526 for the expenses, which the department basically uses a ratio of about 40% expenses, 60% for income. So I'm looking at the best case scenario. So I'm using $110 gross per month. So there's 4 spots at 100. There's 1 spot at 120. So I'm using the 110. So if you use 42 stalls at 110 a month, you're getting $55,440 gross. With the expenses, you're getting a net operating income of $31,914. And this lot was valued by income for the 2020 reassessment. So basically in 2020 reassessment, the cap rate was 5%. I have a couple of other parking lots downtown, and they're at 5%. So I'm applying a cap rate of 5% for the parking lot and getting a market value of $638,000. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
Yes, please. Mr. Rack, did you consider a cost land approach in this scenario? Did you look at any comparable land sales?
No, I did, because there was nothing in 2020 and 2021. And the assumption that every parking lot is going to be sold for development is not reasonable, as you've shown with your comparables. Is I think the first 6 were all parking lots and sold at parking lots. There's an awful lot of land available for development, and in this particular location, I think there's superior locations downtown that if you wanted to develop something, you would pick a different location. So I did not look at that. I basically evaluating it as a parking lot.
In that case, where are the parking lot comparables that you're relying on for this?
I'm basically doing it site specific.
Did you look to stabilize any of these values, such as the vacancy or the NOI?
There's nothing to stabilize. Stabilization means basically if you built a brand new lot and you stabilized it, what stabilization means is that if you had, let's say, 20% of it full on the date of valuation that you did an appraisal. Stabilization means determining what the empty spots would rent for. That's what stabilization means. Same as another example would be, let's say you built a building and it was 10% or 20% occupied. Stabilization is the method or the procedure of determining what the vacant space would rent for to come up with value. So basically, I'm using $110 per square foot, thinking that if those spots did rent out, we're getting 4 spots at 100, 1 spot at 120. I'm going in between, and there's more evidence to say that maybe the spots would rent at 100 because there's 4 spots at market 100, but I went for on the higher end of value at $110 per spot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
Yes, madam. Mr. Rack, how long has this individual owned this land?
I can't be sure, but I've been doing this lot for over a decade, and he owned it before that. So I don't know for sure how long, but it's been over a decade.
You've also mentioned that he bought this lot to make parking for some of the tenants around there. So are
That's
these
correct.
business people or apartment dwellers?
No, they're business people. He owns 274 and 276 Donald, which are 5-story walk-ups, older buildings. And then just down the street, which would be Princess that turns into Donald, there's the theater. And he owns a building beside the theater. So there's no parking for those places. And speaking to him years ago about it, is that he found he couldn't rent those spots out, because of the idea that there's no lot of, the parking down there was quite expensive as far as renting from in-park lots downtown. So he bought this parking lot so that he could basically subsidize a parking for his tenants in those buildings.
And Mr. Rack, you had mentioned that it's a gravel parking lot?
That's correct. It's gravel and it has no plugs.
Mm-hmm. Very unusual for a parking lot not to have electrical plugs?
Usually they do have. I don't know if we could state it's unusual, but usually, I mean, if you're going to park your car in our temperatures, it would be nice to have a plug, and you'd pay more for a plug, and plus you'd pay more for being on asphalt. I mean, gravel's kind of dusty, so it's an inferior lot.
So you feel as if the income approach is the proper evaluation for the subject property?
Yes, I do. I mean, as we all know, that there's lots of parking downtown. south of Portage, east of Main Street. There's a lot of places that it would be advantageous to develop to put a new building out, and not this location. So the only way to value this, I mean, you can't value every property. I mean, there's hundreds of parking lots downtown by development costs. Someone would basically, even if they bought the property to develop, they would pay what it was valued at under the income approach for a parking lot. And as the assessor's comparables show, is that's evident since the first 6 properties he has were sold as parking lots, and they're parking lots today. I think, yes, valuing it as a parking lot is the way to go.
All right, I thank you, Mr. Rack. No further questions, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
How many parking spots are actually subsidized?
Basically, if you look at page 3, you get 1 spot at 65, 3 spots at 75, and 4 spots at 80.
So just the 8 spots are subsidized?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no additional questions. So, Mr. Rack, I understand you have rebuttal evidence.
That is correct.
Okay, give us a minute so we can find it, okay? Does everybody have it open?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead then, Mr. Rack.
Okay, thank you. So on page 1 here, you'll see the assessor's comparables, and he basically made a statement that his comparables are the subject properties valued at vacant commercial land. Well, those commercial lands, he's got 4 at the bottom, and the top 6 are basically parking lots. So they would have been valued for sale on the income approach. That's how someone would buy them. I mean, even a commercial property, you're buying it for the income stream. So location is very important as far as what you can charge, and the fact that whether there's a meter, that you have hourly parking, you have evening parking. Typically, these parking lots, when you rent them for the month, you have to vacate them by 5 o'clock. That's basically what your terms of agreement are. And after 5, then can be rented out per hour, plus for evenings. So you got hourly parking during the day, evening parking, and then weekend parking. So if we turn down to basically page 2, you'll see where the first parking lot is, and it's right off Main Street down Bannatyne, east side of Portage. So it's a superior location. I mean, there's lots of businesses around there, and it's advantageous for higher rent. You'll see the second comparable is Bannatyne also. It's just past Rory, and there's a lot of commercial space around there. Plus, there's a lot of businesses around there where monthly parking would be advantageous. So you're going to pay higher rents because of where it's located. And then if you look at the next comparable on page 4, that's Pioneer. And, that's 124 Bannatyne. So another lot on Bannatyne. Same rules would apply for valuation on that as far as evening parking and weekend parking. The next is number 4 on Pioneer. And you can see that's close to Portage and Maine. They have hourly parking there. And again, I mean, people going to the Richardson building or to Trizac or to any of the concourse or any of the businesses around there, obviously it's going to generate high income. That's why the sale price is so high. So now you're getting to, on page 6, you'll get another lot, 242 Hargrave Street, which is south of Portage. And again, in a good business area. So, I mean, you're going to get a lot of demand for people going to work to park there, on weekends, going to restaurants, etc. The next one, if you go down to page 7, you're getting 155 Gary. Again, same applies to that lot. So that would generate more income. You go down to number 7, which I couldn't find that, but I know basically it was purchased, and I believe there was a house on that property, and it was basically purchased for that business next door. So tenants in that building could basically have a place to park. And then there's, as you see there, it's hard to say, but there's to see it, but there is hourly parking in that lot. The next lot at 220 Main, you go on to page 8-9. It's a small little lot in between properties on Main Street. I don't know if there was a building there and demolished. I have no idea. But that's right on Main Street, so that would go for a high value. And then I couldn't find this other property that's supposed to be at on Carlton Street, so I don't know where that one was. You can see buildings or properties bought. Those two were bought south of, basically south of Portage. I mean, if you're going to buy a property, that's where you're going to buy it for development or use. That's more advantageous than where the subject property is. And then you get number 10, which is at 286 Gary. Again, that location is superior. It's going to generate more revenue evening and weekends. And then if you go to page 11, you'll see basically where all these parking lots are located. The subject is up to the left on Cumberland, and all the assessors comparables 1, 2, 3, and 4 are basically east of Main Street in a highly desirable area. You're getting 5, 6, 8, and 10 are south of Portage. That's a high retail office area, so you're going to get good income from there. Not like the subject property where it's located. So basically, most of the comparables are parking lots. They're purchased based on the income they produce. All but 7, 8, and perhaps 9 have monthly, evening, and weekend and hourly parking. They're all located east of Main Street, south of Portage. All are superior locations which generate substantial higher revenue. Most of these parking lots have ticket machines for evening, hourly, and weekend parking. All are paved. The subject is located in an inferior location to produce income. It's a gravel lot, no plugs. There's no evening or weekend parking. There's no ticket machine for hourly or evening parking or weekend parking. So the income it can generate is substantially less than the comparables. And that's why I believe that the valuation I've come up with represents what the subject would be worth as of April 1st, 2020. And that's my rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Kupfer, do you have questions on the rebuttal evidence?
I do, thank you. You state on the final page here, Lyle, they are purchased based on the income they produce. But I haven't seen an income stream supplied with any of these corroborating the sale price. Did you do that analysis somewhere else?
Say that again?
You've stated multiple times now that these properties are valued and sold based on the income that they produce, but I don't see an income stream along with any of these sale prices to show that. So where is that assertion coming from?
Well, you've supplied the sale prices, and the assertion I'm making is the fact that I've been doing this for over 30 years, and that's how properties are sold. That's why they're based on the income approach. That's the whole idea of the income approach, is to determine expenses, gross income, and that's how you determine the valuation. That's the whole premise of how the city values most of their property, is on the income approach.
You state in point 4, all are superior locations which generate substantially higher revenue. Did you supply the revenues for any of these parking lots?
No, I don't have the revenues for the parking lots, but they would generate more income, obviously, because the subject property doesn't have weekend parking, doesn't have evening parking, doesn't have evening parking, or the properties that you've basically submitted as comparables all do.
So you say that the subject property is not paved and it doesn't have plugs. Does that not mean it's more likely to be developed and less like these parking lots that you're saying it's like?
No. A parking lot is developed into commercial space or to a building or whatever based on its location. And basically, I mean, let's say if you're a Great West Life and you were looking to build another building, you would basically not build it there. You'd build it somewhere downtown in the core area where it'd have a better location. I mean, if you're going to spend the money on a building which is going to be the same no matter where you build it, location is going to be everything. You're going to build it on the best location that you can find. You're not going to build something here.
So if paving the lot generates higher parking revenues and adding electrical to the lot would generate higher revenues, and you're saying that they're not planning to develop this, then why haven't they done that work?
Because of the location it's in. The owner knows he can't even get, I mean, if you look at the income, you look at what he's renting these spots for, if you're only getting $100 for 4 spots, you're getting $120 for 1 spot, you have 14 vacancies, investing tens of thousands of dollars into electrical and paving is not going to make that revenue go up anymore. If you had that lot was, let's say, somewhere where your comparables are, south of Portage or east of Main Street, perhaps that would be a good idea, but not exactly where the lot is, because you're not going to increase the revenues by that much for spending tens of thousands of dollars in paving and plugs.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence presented?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
No, thanks.
Okay, and neither do I. And Mr. Kupfer, do you have rebuttal evidence?
I have none.
Thank you. And is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you.
No, thank
Okay,
you.
Mr. Rack? Okay, no? All right, then that concludes item number 1. Thank you very much, Mr. Rack.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Okay. The next item on our agenda is item number 2, 212 Bannatyne. So we'll bring in Mr. Badger.
Badger, can you unmute yourself?
The next item on our agenda is item number 2.
Perfect.
Oh, great.
Badger, please state your full name for the record.
Jeff Badger.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Badger.
Good afternoon.
You're here representing 212 Bannatyne Avenue.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Kupfer, then, when you're ready, we'll start with 212 Bannatyne Avenue.
That's roll number 130608400000, 212 Bannatyne Avenue. This one is on the corner of Albert and Bannatyne. We're just off Main Street here. Again, this is a commercial surface parking lot. This one is 7,706 total square feet, and we have a 2023 modeled assessment of 736,000, which is again being derived from land value. Page 2 of my brief shows that we have no recent sales for the subject and gives an overhead view of the surface parking lot you can see there along Bannatyne. I provided some additional photos just off of Google Street View to give you an idea. And then page 4 of my brief has the rent comparables table. It's the same one we used for the last property. This one, 7,706 square feet, is being assessed at $95.51 per foot, which from what I can see aligns quite well with the other sales comparables that we have along Bannatyne here. Both comparables 1, 2, and 3 are all reasonably closely located and sold between about $95 and $120 a foot. So based on this information, I'm going to recommend that the 2023 modeled assessment be maintained at $736,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Badger, do you have any questions of Mr. Kupfer's evidence?
Yes. Okay. So you're relying on comp 1, 2, and 3, and the rest of the ones you're discounting?
No, I think comparables 1, 2, and 3 are likely the best approximation of our subject property. I haven't discounted anything.
Okay. Is there a reason why you haven't selected any post 2019 comparables up to the reference date?
Nope, we just selected the best ones available.
So were you able to find any post 2019 comparables?
Well, we'd be looking at between October 9th here and then the reference date April 1, 2021.
Yes.
Yeah, off the top of my head, nope, these are the best ones available. Are there some sales that sold after October 2019? Likely, yes.
Have you researched the purpose for these sales?
Have I researched for the purpose of these sales?
Yeah, what was the motivation behind them buying them? Were they publicly offered, or were they non-advertised deals or anything like that? Or what was the intention was for the property? Was the intention for development purposes or for parking revenue purposes? Or
The intention isn't always made clear. The practice is generally to send a sales questionnaire if the sale goes through and it's not publicly available information, or we'll ensure that at least the sale is arm's length. It should be used for analysis. I would suggest that among the 10 comparables, the usage and the intention likely varies.
okay. My next quick question is on were you able to check the development potential? You know, things like access, easements on the properties, or their ability to develop them?
I don't have a list of easements for the comparable properties, no. I have made note of the zoning, which is a relevant factor towards development potential, of course. When you took a look at on the map to locate the properties, were you able to determine whether or not it's public back lanes Are you referring to the subject?
for access purposes on these properties?
Are you referring to the comparable properties or the subject?
Yes, the comparable properties.
I didn't make note of whether there's a back lane, no.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Badge. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions of the assessor's evidence?
Yes, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Kupfer, you have stated, as in the previous property that we talked about, that this is land value only. And did you do an income approach? And I think you had stated to the previous one where you did do both approaches, but the model attributed the land value as being the highest. Is this correct?
Pretty close. So the model will produce both values and will default to whichever one is effectively higher, essentially attributing that to the highest and best use of the property with whatever available information there is. So like the last property, this one would have defaulted to land value as the income stream would have produced a lower total assessment.
I thank you, Mr. Kupfer. No other questions, Madam Chairperson?
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
My question was just answered. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions. So, Mr. Badger, when you're ready with your presentation, you may begin.
Thank you. Okay, the subject property, I'll just run through it, is 212 Bannatyne. It's a surface paid parking lot. Zoning is in a character district. When you're in a character district, with the character zoning, it does require downtown design review, and it also it's more restrictive than the other areas of downtown in terms of density on the site. I just want to go on the site area. It's 69 feet in the frontage, and the depth is 110. There's 19 parking stalls. I know when you look at it from an aerial point of view, it appears that there's more parking stalls, but on two sides of this parking lot, it abuts up against existing buildings. there's no public back lane between this building and the existing buildings. Therefore, the buildings that it butts up to have what they're referred to as easement rights over this parking lot for them to gain access to their buildings. They have windows and doors, etc. So we're down to about 19 parking stalls rather than there is a potential to put maybe 22 on there. We argue about in the past, but allowing for them to have their rights of access onto the property reduces the parking stall count. I know, I believe it's important to note this particular property, it does have what I refer to, it has some obscured restrictions on development. Number one is the size of the parking lot. It's quite small. Number two, because it abuts and it has the easement, it reduces the potential of the land here to develop. Going over the past assessments, I've brought this forward, and after explaining the impediments in terms of the development on this site, that they shouldn't be relying on a gross area, they should be looking at the usable areas, which we'll get into later on. But we've been successful on the 2018, the 2020, the 2023, those three assessment periods, 16, 18, and 20, to have reductions that have been agreed upon and brought forward from the assessment department to this particular board here and have reduced them. Based on the last go around, the 2020, the recommendation from the assessment department.
Hey, Mr. Badger, what happened in a previous assessment we can't comment on.
Okay, I would like, that's fine. I guess I'm pointing this out because there's various problems in the model-driven approach, in that it doesn't pick up these issues that have already been resolved in previous assessments. Okay, so the current assessment actually is 33% increase over the previous assessment. We all know that because the COVID, parking lots are getting hit with evaluations that are being values being pushed down and assessments have been pushed down. In this particular case, it's a 33% increase. So something's wrong here. So that's my exercise now, is to run through it and explain why. Okay. So I'm just going to go flip over to page 3, the description. I think I've explained myself in terms of the 2 easements on the property. That's evidence if you take a look at exhibits 3 and 4, which are on the back end on pages 9. You'll see I drew a dotted line there showing you the easements for the other 2 properties that are abutting up against it. That if you were to develop, you can't build right up against the property. You have to have a setback to allow the people for their easements that they have in place in the adjacent buildings. The effect of that is to reduce the usable area by 25%. The assessor is saying they're taking the development potential in the properties, development values, but they have not taken into account the reduction in the usable area of the lot. It's going to carry on. I mentioned also about the zoning, so it does restrict the development potential of the site. A good example is the assessor's comparable on Lombard. One of those properties is being developed for housing, and they got their density slashed on them when after they started. They bought the land, then they found out they couldn't get their approvals from downtown design review because they said that they're going too higher than the adjacent building. So its development potential was reduced. Okay, it's going to carry on. I also want to mention right now, this particular parking lot is non-compliance with current zoning. Current zoning for parking lots would require a setback on the public side, sidewalks around the property on the other 2 sides. It's grandfathered, and such time in the future, we never know, they might start imposing current zoning restrictions for parking lots downtown. Okay, so I think it's important. I'm not an assessor, I'm not an appraiser, but I've been in the development business for quite a long time. And I believe I have a full understanding of some of the due diligence to take a look at sites and talk about what can be built and what are some of the impediments of these particular sites. I'm actually in some of the comparables that the assessors use. I've been involved in a couple of those lots, one over in Pioneer. In terms of the comparables I'm using for my comparables, I've been involved in about 2 of those sites, as well as taking them into the development phases after the land acquisition. But in any event, I believe it's important to take a look at both the income approach and the market approach, and then compare the two and see if something's wrong or if there's a difference. But they should be pretty parallel. But in this particular case, even at the assessor, it says the income approach produces a value which is kind of a bit lower. So I did both approaches, okay, and then I came at the end. I came in and did a review between the two to come up with an evaluation between the two approaches. On the direct market approach, on page 8, you'll see my analysis of my comparables. And what I did, the first thing I did do was I searched high and low to find some examples beyond 2019. And it's pretty tough because the development market downtown has really slowed down since the outbreak of COVID with all the uncertainty. But I have 505 St. Mary Avenue, and that was one that I was involved in, which was they bought a site. This is for the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation. Its value on the acquisition price was $66 per square foot of the whole area of the site. I do make a time adjustment of 2.5%, to bring it up to the 2021 reference year. So I evaluated that at $73.30 per square foot. 265 Princess Avenue is another one that I'm familiar with. It was a lot that was purchased, and there's a brand new apartment building that's been put up, and it's been leased. But it was bought at $53.61 per square foot, and then applying the time value adjustment and put it up around $58.97 per square foot. Good Street, I know it's on the fringe of the downtown, was purchased in 2018. The purchase price was $56.55 a square foot, and its value was just under $60 a square foot. I forgot to mention, like 505 St. Mary's is now 110 apartment units on that site. 265, there's 70 plus apartment units on that site. 206, 248 has 150 units apartments on that site. And then the one, I believe it's in a high demand area. I know it's outside of the core because it's across the river. It's 255 Bell Street. It's a more recent sale. And that was at $77.16. And now it's nearing completion. There's about approximately 50 units being built on that site there. So these are all sites, bought for development purposes, which would be reflective of the market value of a property there. Utilizing this, I took the average price. I said that my assumption was the average between these sales would give you a value of $67.20 per square foot. Applying that to the gross area of the land that we're talking about, it would give you a value of $517,000 on a market approach. That's without any adjustments to what I was saying, the impediment on this property, that we can only build on 75% of the property if we were to build something. So that's my evaluation on the comparative market approach. On the income approach, I can flip over to page 7. Am I going too fast for everybody, or
Nope.
keeping up?
Nope, go ahead. Yep.
That's my appendix 1, the income approach. As the assessor stated, their model basically kicked out the income approach because it said it was low. So they didn't bother looking at it. I have the area of the parking lot. There's 19 stalls there. The net income that was reported to me by the manager of the parking lot, the net income was $20,900. And net income per stall per month worked out to 103. I used the cap rate that we used before, and it's less than the cap rate that was used in your previous hearing there, but I used 4.5 cents, 4.5%. The income approach that gives you a value of $465,000. Now the problem is I got an income approach which is really low, and I got a market approach which is higher. In my final recommendation, I suggested a midpoint between the two, and my the basis of that, or my thinking, my logic on that, is to not rely on 100% of the market approach, because there should be an adjustment for the usable area problem. So I said I just took the midpoint, which is $491,000. Okay, so it's higher than the income approach, it's lower than the market approach, but I think I've satisfied to you that there's some restrictions in this property in terms of development that has to be taken into account. So in summary, I just want to mention that, repeat myself, I guess, 25% is not usable. There should be an adjustment on the market approach downwards, based on that. As evidenced by the assessor's selection of comparables, there hasn't been very many sales since 2019, since COVID hit. It's impacting these lots. People are only buying these lots if they have a specific purpose to use the lots. So they're far and few in between. This particular one is so small. I don't think it'd be very, development potential is very, very restrictive just because of the size. All the other comparables that I gave you and the assessor are using are large. They're almost double this, where you can have a potential to start putting up apartment buildings and things like that. So this particular one is a bit of an offshoot, the squeezed little lot that is downtown. I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, or you can refute it, or the assessor can refuse it, but I just want to pinpoint a few things on the assessor's comparables.
Mr. Badger, you've already had an opportunity to ask questions of the assessor. I'm
not going to ask him any more questions. I just want to pinpoint.
Okay.
This is just a general trend. On the 4 comparables that he said that he would rely on, the 2023 assessment on most properties range from 10 to 38% less than what the people paid for them. Okay, I'm just going to say, so something's haywire here in terms of the assessment that was on my client's property. It means that people are, if they have a specific use, they really want it, they'll overpay for it. And so I believe that there's evidence, and there's evidence that that tells me that there has to be an adjustment in the the current assessed value of the property. Okay, that finishes my overview.
Thank you, Mr. Badger. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. Starting with the net operating income of your income approach, Mr. Badger, 20,919. Where did that value come from? I haven't found that anywhere.
It came from I indicated to you, I was given the information by the parking lot manager. So it is managed by an outside parking management company.
For what year?
Well, this is for the year ending December 31st, ending 2020.
So that's the income and expense report that I've included in my brief, and that's not the net operating income. That's
I don't see your. There's nothing in there.
Last page of my brief?
Yeah, you don't have any income report in there, please.
Does anybody else have it, or did I leave that out?
Oh,
It's there on page 7. It's the very last page.
oh yeah, okay. Okay, it's 23,750. I guess I have it here. I see that now.
They're also including suite rental income and presumably expenses for that. Can you comment at all on the suite rental income that's being included with the income and expenses for this lot?
Yeah, the difference is the professional fees. On this review here, I picked up professional fees that wasn't included. So there's a difference, I guess, in my income. There's a difference of about $3,000. I would say professional fees. I know I had to appeal it, so for the 2020. So I guess my fees weren't included in there yet. But he did spend some money on it for professional.
Do you have any market comparables, rent comparables, parking lot comparables at all?
No.
Okay. Turning to your land comparables then, all 4 of them are significantly larger than the subject, correct?
That's correct.
You make any sort of adjustment for economies of scale to take into account this discrepancy in size?
Adjustments for size?
Yes.
No, I never made any adjustment for size.
Okay. Would you agree that my comparable table is a stronger representation of the subject, including 170 and 127 Bannatyne, which are all closer in land size and share the same zoning as the subject?
I've discounted everything other than the 4 because they're so old. To be quite frank, I think it's so far-fetched in terms of when the sales took place, and there's no adjustments for time periods. We're in a new era. Based on 2019, we're in a new era.
The sales I'm referencing took place in October 2019. Your comparables take place between 2016 and 2020. So again, the comparables that I'm supplying are not only closer to the reference date, closer in size, closer in proximity, and share the same zoning characteristics, correct?
Well, okay. Basically, I'm saying I'm discounting anything you put in there that's older than August 19.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
I have none right now, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay, and neither do I. So I think that concludes then item number 2 on our agenda. Thank you very much, Mr. Badger. You'll
Thank you very
receive
much.
it very soon. Can we just take a 5-minute recess? My technology seems to be working again, and I need to log out of my phone and back onto my iPad.
What are we coming back with?
We're coming back, and we will be dealing with item number 6.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. First of all, before we begin, we will get our applicant's testimony affirmed, Mr. Robertson.
Certainly. Mr. Van Bruggen, please state your full name.
Thank you very much. Wesley Van Bruggen.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chappelles, please state your full name.
Grayson Sharples.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now going to deal with item number 6 on our agenda. That's 900 Harrow Street East. Mr. Kupfer, when you're ready, you may begin with your presentation, please.
1 second. All right, so this is roll number 1209-7804265, street address 900 Harrow Street East. This one is on the corner of Pembina and Harrow. It's a commercial bank property mixed with some commercial office in there as well. 1 to 2 stories, constructed between 1997 and 2000. So we're dealing with a newer building here. We have on file leasable area of 23,264 square feet and a modeled 2023 assessment of $7,312,000 that we'll be recommending be maintained today. If you turn to page 2 of my brief, you can get a good view of the subject property. Like I said, right on the corner of Harrow and Pembina there. It's actually 2 separate buildings. Assiniboine Credit Union, I believe, was the main tenant here of the separate one. And then we had a combination of bank, office, and maybe some medical as well in the main building here. Page 3 of my brief, more photos of the subject property. These ones from Google Street View. I've included 2 comparable rent sets for you here. The first being for banks, the second for OFS rents. As this is a combination of both, very generally speaking, banks tend to pay a bit more in rents. They take good care of their spaces. They make for good tenants. The average we pulled from our bank sampling here is a little over $26 with a min-max between 18 and 36. Our OFS rent comparables, our office comparables, this is outside of the downtown, average at around $16 with your min-max between about 10 and 22.50. The subject property is being modeled in 2 different premise IDs here. The first one is for the main building. The one here I said was a combination of office space as well as other tenants. We've got a total potential rent of $330,356. Again, this is all modeled over 17,100 square feet, which gives you $19.32 rounded, being applied as an average modeled rent. 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall, and a capitalization rate of 6.4% is deriving a value of $4,543,000 for this section of the property. The next page is just a bank stream. This is for the separate building there. This one is 6,164 square feet. The given rent, like I stated, for banks generally tends to be higher. So this one is being modeled at $28.05. The vacancy is also lower at 2% compared to 6% for the OFS stream. The expenses and shortfall are the same, and the capitalization rate is also lower, being modeled at 5.9%, which derives a value of $2,769,000 for this premise ID. Page 11 of my brief has the combination income value stream. So when you add it together, you get that estimated market value of $7,312,000 using a total net operating income of $456,000 and a blended capitalization rate of 6.24%. Page 12 and page 13 of my brief is all our standard model capitalization rate tables and municipal act excerpts. I've included all of the income and expense information that we received for 2020. I believe that the rents that are in place largely support the modeled rents that we have. Walk through them with you here. If you scroll down to the master rent roll, I apologize, this isn't a numbered page. When I scan in my income and expense mailers, they don't get numbered. I'll have to fix that. But generally speaking here, you see orthotic design, massage clinic. These are the quote unquote medical they get classified as. They go into high quality finish. This one here, Zang Massage, for example, is renting at $21 a foot. These are all net rents. Assiniboine Credit Union is renting at $23 a foot. So they had a space in the main building as well as that separate building to themselves. Same rental rate at $23 a foot, I believe. Donald R. Knight is renting at $18.50. Zang Massage Clinic at $21. Recovery of Hope at $16. And AES at $17. Dr. Jamie Gillespie at $17.25. And the final one there, the chartered accountant at $18 a foot. So I believe this property is being modeled fairly close, at least in terms of the net operating income here for what it's going to achieve. Based on what I know at this time, I'm just going to recommend that that model assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Van Bruggen, Mr. Sharples, do either of you have questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If we could turn to page 2, please.
Yeah, we're there. When go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just a clarification. On page 2, you had stated there are 2 buildings on the site, correct?
That's what I'm seeing, yes.
Right. And is the bank located in the main building, or that's located in the middle of the page, or the building that's kind of located on the left-hand side of that page?
The income and expense mailer that was submitted indicates that ACU is actually in both buildings as of 2020.
Is in both buildings as of 2020. Okay. If we can turn to, all right. Fair enough. If we can turn to page, moving to page 4, please.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Actually, I guess the next question, I should ask this. Have you ever been to the site?
I haven't inspected the site. I've driven through here. I live not far from here, so I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so have you ever been to both buildings on the site?
No, I haven't been inside them.
Okay, fair enough. If we can move to page 4. So on page 4, we can see that 900. There's a lease there for 900 Harrow, correct, on the bottom?
That's right.
And that's a 1-year lease. Now, do you know, has that been renewed, or is Sustainable Credit Union still in the building?
You've indicated to me through our conversations that they've vacated since the 2020 income and expense mailer that I've reviewed.
Okay. And you would agree that when we take a look, the bank space has been assessed at $28 a square foot, but yet when we take a look at the actual rent that they signed, it was for $23 within the valuation. Is that correct?
Confirmed.
Okay, and then when I look at the average and median, I see $26 and $26.50. So why $28 on the site?
That's what the model picked for it. I would suggest it's likely higher than the average based on the newer age, good location, those types of factors.
But when we take a look at the actual lease for the building, you would agree that's lower than the $28, correct?
Signed at $23.
Okay, sounds good. I think that concludes my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sharples, do you have any additional questions?
I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
I thank you, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Kupfer, the cap rate for, I guess, the main building that has 17,100, all model driven at the 6.45.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any overrides at all?
None that I'm aware of. Certainly none that I've made.
Okay, and then the other part there that contains 6,140, pardon me, 6,164 square feet. The same question, cap rate 5.9. Any overrides at all?
No overrides, nothing of the sort. From what I can tell, yeah.
Okay. And this was determined based on location and the age of the property, which is 1997 to 2000.
Yeah,
correct?
My understanding is newer properties that are well located will largely get a lower cap rate by our model.
So the applicant raised the question in regards to the credit union, and the model is using for that particular square footage $28.05 compared to 23.
That's correct.
All right. I have no other questions, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have questions?
My question was just answered.
Thank you. Okay. I think I'll wait for the applicant's presentation before I ask this question, but maybe I'm just going to hold off until we hear from Mr. Van Bergen and Mr. Sharples. So go ahead with your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If the board can turn with me to page 3 of our submission, we'll get started. If the board can just let me know when you're there.
Yep, you can go ahead.
Thank you. So the subject property is a suburban office property constructed, as mentioned, between 1997 and 2000, with an assessed effective age of 1998. The gross leasable area for the two buildings combined is 22,796 square feet, and the assessed value, as mentioned by the assessment department, is $7,312,000, as derived using the income approach to value. M&P will be requesting a value of $4,402,000. If the board will move with me to page 5.
Yep.
Thank you. So on page 5, we have our valuation request for this particular property. As mentioned previously by the assessor, the property has been valued using 2 income streams. So one is for the bank space, and that's the 6,164 square feet of space. That's been a rental rate of $28.05 has been applied, as well as both a lower vacancy rate and a capitalization rate. And then the second income stream is for the office component of the property. As mentioned, the rental rate applied is $19.32, a 6% vacancy rate, 3% expense ratio, and a 6.45% capitalization rate has been applied. M&P's request, you can see on the right-hand side of this chart, is for the property to be value combined. So just a couple matters here. So as mentioned, as indicated, the Assiniboine Credit Union had moved out. So initially back a number of years ago, the Assiniboine Credit Union had occupied the majority of the building, as well as the second building on the site. Over the last, say, 5-6 years, they've slowly been decreasing the amount of space they've been occupying the building, dropping off that space. And it's as they drop it off, it's been rented to office tenants, who's ever available. So at this point in time, and the reason I asked if the assessor had been to the site is that the Assiniboine Credit Union actually only is located within the main building. So that's the larger building on the site. The second building on the site is actually occupied by Snyder's Orthotics. So it's actually not occupied by the bank. They haven't occupied that space in a while. So the bank actually was so when the last time I was there, the bank was occupying the main floor space in the building, as well as some second floor space in the building. However, as mentioned, that lease is coming to an end. The bank has pulled out of both spaces within the building. They're no longer occupying any space either on the main floor of the main building or the second floor of the building. As such, that space is now going to be reverted to the market. So we'll have a little discussion of that further on. So that space is, they are looking at leasing that space out to a variety of tenants. Again, it looks more like that they'd be probably getting a tenant that would be more related to office, not necessarily related to banks. Unfortunately, banks are one of those situations where they tend to sign long leases within specific locations, and they don't tend to, again, they tend to use renewals. When they do move out, it's very difficult. In many cases, you see those spaces being leased to other tenants, no longer banks. So here we can see our request. So we're using the requested area for the building at 22,796 square feet. We're using a vacancy rate of 11.2%. So we'll get to that and discuss why we feel this is an appropriate rate. We've adjusted the rental rate for the property. When we take a look, we feel that the rental rate of the property is a little high at $19.32. We've kept the same expense allowance. We've kept the same expense shortfall, as well as the same capitalization rate of 6.45%. Using these parameters, M&P is requesting a value of $4,401,954, truncated to $4,402,000 for that property. If the board will turn with me to page 8. On page 8, we have the valuation for the property from the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department. Here we can just see the breakdown, as mentioned already, for that particular property. You can see that on pages. You can see that information on pages 8 and 9. Page 10 is just an overhead map provided by the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department, just showing the outline of that property as indicated on the corner of Haro and Pembina Highway. As well, we have a site map from Google Maps located on page 11 and overhead views on page 12. Page 13, we have 2 exterior photos of that property. So the top photo is of the main building. The second photo is of the second building on the site. for that property. If the board will move with me to page 14. On page 14, we start with our issues for this property. So the first is the area of the property. As indicated, the property has been assessed with a total area of 23,264 square feet. But according to the income and expense mailer, it looks like that area should be adjusted to 22,796 square feet. Now, for this property, just one note. So the property actually has, so the two buildings that are on the site, as well as a third building that's on the rent roll, that's at 717 Haro. It's actually a separate building assessed with a separate assessment. So when we take a look at that, so the first is a slight variance in difference. The second is the physical characteristics of the bank space. As mentioned, the property has been assessed with an area of 6,164 square feet of bank space. However, as mentioned, the Assiniboine Credit Union moved out of the space. So they moved out of the main floor space January 31st, 2022, and their second floor space July 31st, 2021. So again, it's M&P's position that as we're looking at the valuation for the property and the physical characteristics, since the bank no longer occupies the space, it's M&P's position, and we're seeing that space is being leased within the market. Again, typically, well, it'd be lovely if they could get a bank. It's our understanding that they're looking for any tenant to be renting that space, probably going to be an office tenant. Again, as we take a look at that, it's our position that that space should be assessed much the same as what you would with an office space. So the same, using a rental rate that would be typical for the building, as well as a vacancy rate and a capitalization rate that would be applied as applicable to the office space. If the board will turn with me to page 15. So page 15, we have an email. This is between myself and the property manager, which is Remco Realty. So I posed the question to Nick whether or not the space had been occupied or when Assiniboine Credit Union had moved out. And he had indicated that at 900 Haro, ACU, standing for Assiniboine Credit Union, moved out of Unit 200 July 31st, 2021, and Unit 100, that's the main floor space, July 31st, 2022, which lines up because when we take a look at had taken a look at the rent roll, we could see, as indicated by the assessor's information, it was only a 1-year lease that the space had been signed for. And once that lease was up, they had moved out of the space. So we can see that the bank no longer occupies any space within the building. That's either on the second floor of the building, the main floor, or the main floor of the building. They've pulled out completely. If the board turns with me to page 24, please. Let's give the board a moment to get there.
Yep, go ahead.
So on page 24, we have a lease document. So this is from Capital Commercial Real Estate Services, Inc. for 900 Haro Street East, so the subject property. You can see there that they're indicating there's 6,164 square feet, 3,109 square feet, and 917 square feet available for lease. If the board turns with me down to the next page, page 25, you can see the locations of those. So Unit 100, so that's the space that was formerly occupied by Assiniboine Credit Union. This is the 6,164 square feet is available on the market. You can see the second floor space. This is space that was previously occupied and that they had moved out of, as indicated earlier, 3,109 square feet. And then they've got an additional suite 203. So that's just another floor space on the second floor that had been vacant. Page 26 and 27, they just provide, page 26 provides an outline of the main floor space, and 27 provides an outline of the second floor space for the board there. So as the board will note, actually, one thing of note, interest is these actually are, both of these spaces, as indicated, are in the main building. Neither of these spaces are in the second building on the site. So when we're taking a look at the capitalization rate for the board, it's important to note that the capitalization rate for the bank, that the bank space or the former bank space is located within the same building as the office space. If the board turns with me to page 32, on page 32, we have an excerpt from Remco Realty's website. And if the board can just let me know when you're there.
Yep, go ahead.
Right, so here we have just an advertisement for that space. We can see 6,164 square feet of prime space for financial institution, professional office, or clinic. Roughly half the main floor is available. So and then they go and lay that out. So again, when they're looking for tenants, tenancy for this space, they're casting a wide net, so they're not necessarily restricting their search for they're not restricting their search for a financial institution. They've cast a pretty wide net in terms of finding anyone who's available to rent that space. My understanding is that they'd certainly be willing. They're certainly looking to fill that space regardless of the tenancy. So, given the fact that we would see that the space is empty, they are casting a fairly wide net. We feel that it'd be more typical or more appropriate to apply a rental rate and to value the space as you would a retail or as an office space versus a bank space, as they're no longer occupying that. If the board can flip back with me to page 16, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So on page 16, we have the second issue for the board, which is in question of the rental rate. So the office component of the property has been assessed with a blended rental rate of $19.31. However, when we take a look at the leasing, and the assessor had already highlighted the rent roll for the property, we can see that there's only 2 leases in here actually that are above the $19. So these are fairly small units. One is 444 square feet. The second one is 373 square feet. Those are assessed. Those have rented at a rate of $21 a square foot. Everything else, and it's worth noting, some of these leases, those 2 leases that took place in 2018. You can see that there's 2019 and 2020 leasing from the building, and those spaces are leasing at $17.25 to $18.50. So also worth noting that those spaces they're a little bit larger, and the majority of the building is made up of units that are larger than the 500 square feet. So typically when we take a look at buildings and we take a look at rental rates, we would expect that typically smaller spaces lease at a higher rental rate on a per square foot basis compared to the largest spaces. So we take a look at the average. We can see the average leasing in the building is $17.24. The median is $18. And then when we take a look at the weighted average, it's $15.46. The reason we look at the weighted average is just to get rid of some of the noise from the smaller spaces to determine what an appropriate rental rate would be. Additionally, we've taken a look at other leasing that's within the market in the area. So we can see these leases have been signed between 2015 and 2020. In terms of time frame, they range from 1 year to 10 years. In terms of size, they range in terms of size from the low of about 1,178 square feet to a high of 16,370 square feet. When we take a look at the rental rates for these spaces, these rental rates range from $12 to $19.50 per square foot, with an average of $15.21, a median of $15, and a weighted average of $15.35. If the board will move with me to page 17. So on page 17, we provided just an outline of where those lease comparables are from. So if the board looks, you can see the subject property, 900 Harrow Street. And I apologize, it's a little difficult to see, but it's located with the red pin, kind of located within the middle of the page, but just above Grant Park there. And then you can see the comparables that have been utilized are within fairly close proximity to that subject property. Again, outlined. So 395 Stafford would be a location fairly close. Then you can see that we have 1150 Waverly, 1190 Waverly Street, another one for 1150, 895 Waverly, as well as a variety of others. So we've tried to take comparables within as close to the area as possible to determine what a reasonable rental rate would be when we're taking a look at the property. If the board will move with me to page 18.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on page 18, we have the second issue, or the next issue, I guess, for the board, which is the vacancy rate. So the subject property has been assessed with a vacancy rate of 6%. However, when we look at the April 2021 rent roll, we can see there's 4,189 square feet of vacant space in the building. That equates to a vacancy rate of 18.37%. So quite a bit higher than that 6%. Additionally, when we take a look at the vacancy rates, we take a look at some market reports. We can actually see the vacancy rate for suburban office properties has gone up by quite a bit. We have an excerpt from the Johnson report. Here we take a look at Class A suburban office properties. We can see that between 2018, 2019 to 2021, there have been a significant increase in those vacancy rates. So we can see for 2020, that vacancy rate applied, or that the Johnson report has indicated, is 11.2% for Class A suburban office properties. So quite a bit higher than that 6% applied. Additionally, if the board will turn with me to page 40, please.
Yep.
Thank you. So here we have an market report. This is for second quarter of 2021 from Avis Young. One of the big challenges, and again, I think probably has been indicated or discussed quite a bit over the last little bit, has been the impact of COVID. Obviously, the impact of COVID has had a significant impact on the office market, with more employers looking at taking a hybrid approach. And as a result, we've seen a downward shift in the amount of space needed. Here we can see Avis Young indicating that the average vacancy rate for the suburban market has gone up. You can see that they're indicating that it's 12.4% as of the second quarter for 2021. If the board will move with me to page 41. Page 41, we have a Q2 report from 2021 for CBRE. Again, we can see that the vacancy rate is up to 13.1% as indicated. And if the board turns with me to page 43. Page 43, well, unfortunately, they don't break it out by A and B class. Every market report looks at it differently. You can see B class suburban office properties at a 10.4% vacancy rate. So quite a bit higher, again, than that 6% that's been applied to the subject property through the model. If the board turns with me to page 45, please. Page 45, we have the Q2 2021 report from Colliers. We can see as well on Colliers, they're indicating for the office market report an increase. They're indicating an overall vacancy rate of 13.3% for the office market. The board turns with me to the next page 46. You can see that they've indicated that the suburban office vacancy rate has increased, that on the bottom for vacancy rate, from 10.1% in 2020 up to 12.6% for Q1 2021. So again, showing that that there has been that shift upwards. When we move to page 47, again, we show a breakdown on a per area basis. So we can see for the suburban office market, while they don't recognize any A class in the suburban office market, office properties, they do look at the B class and they show 10.8%. So much the same as what we had seen earlier. And then finally, if the board turns with me to page 49, we have a market report from Cushman & Wakefield and Stevenson. Here you can see this is from Q2, the office report from Q2 2021, indicating that the vacancy rate has increased to 12.2% for the overall market. Again, indicating that there have been some struggles when it comes to the office vacancy rate. So again, when we take a look at this, we can see that the subject property certainly is experiencing some higher vacancy rate as well. They've lost a fairly major tenant on the main floor, as well as they have some overall vacancy within the building. So it would be our position that given that fact that they are struggling with this, or that they are dealing with vacancy, it's going to be a little more challenging to find a tenant for this space, given the current market conditions. If the board can turn with me, flipping back to page 19, please. And just let me know when you're there.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So this last consideration is just in terms of how, is a check in terms of how the value lines up with sales within the market. So taking a look at the total value of the property at $7,312,000, we can see this equates to an overall value of $321 per square foot. However, when we take a look at similar office properties within the market, there haven't been a lot, but when we try to take a look at similar properties that are of similar size, located within the suburban office market, we've identified 3 properties. They've transacted between 2015 and 2018, and we can see that these sale prices, these properties have sold for values ranging from $165 to $182 per square foot. So quite a bit lower. When we take a look at a requested value of $4,402,000, this equates to a value of $193 per square foot, which we feel is more in line. We recognize that this is a bit of a newer property compared to what the other sales are, as well as those sales are a little bit older. But we feel about the $193, or roughly around $200 a square foot, would be reasonable for this subject property, given the physical characteristics of what we're looking at and the leasing within the market. Here we provided a table on page 19, just highlighting where those properties are located. So you can see the subject property at 900 Harrow, located in the middle of the page with the red pin. Located within fairly close proximity is 905 Waverly. So that property is 26,944 square feet. So roughly the same size as the subject property. Sold for $167 a square foot, 1987 year construction, so a little bit older. As well, on the far side there, we have 3401 Roblin. That one sold in 2016 for $182 a square foot. And then finally, we have 582 King Edward. So located a little bit of a different area. But again, we take a look, 1986 year construction, 32,000 square feet, so a little bit larger. 2018 year sale, sold for $5.4 million, so that's $165 a square foot. So again, we take a look at, we're just doing a double check based on our value to make sure that it lines up with what we're seeing within the market. Page 20, we have our conclusion. So again, as we've already indicated, taking a look at the property, our position is the fact that that area is slightly wrong. So we, as based on the income and expense mailer, so we've made that correction. We've applied an 11.2% vacancy rate to account for the overall vacancy within the market, especially considering the fact that they have lost a major tenant and they've got some, they're going to be certainly having to do a lot of leasing within the building. We've applied a rental rate of close to that $15.50, I believe, on a per square foot basis. To the entire building, keeping the expense allowance, the capitalization rate the same. That's how we get to our value of $4,402,000. Actually, just give me 1 second here. If the board will flip with me to starting on page 34.
Yep, go ahead.
So starting on page 34, this is the information for the subject property. The rent roll that had been applied for this particular property. You can see here as we take a look that just highlighting the Assiniboia Credit Union. This is the second floor space located in the second floor in the main floor building. You can see this lease concluded January 31st, 2022. There was no renewal as indicated. If the board turns down with me, and then if the board looks on page 34, you can see the main floor space at 6,164 square feet. Again, that lease ends January 31st, 2022. No renewal on that building, on that space either. So again, when we take a look at that, that highlights the fact that there are some challenges for this particular property when they're taking a look at leasing that space within the building. If the board will turn with me, starting on page 38, page 38 is the Johnson report. And we show that page 39, the June head lease space. We can see for 2020, this would be for the year 2020. You can see what that vacancy rate is for suburban off A-class properties at 11.2% as indicated there. On page 39, starting on page 40 to 50 is the supporting information for the other market reports. Starting at page 51, we have the comparable sales. So the first sale is 3401 Roblin. We provided a picture there of that property. Page 52 is 905 Waverly. And then page 53, we have 582 King Edward. So again, we've taken a look. We want to make sure that as we take a look at the value, that the value does line up with sales that we see within the market. As mentioned, these properties have sold between $185 to $187 a square foot. We're asking for a value of $200 a square foot, which we feel is reasonable for the property. Starting on page 55, continuing on until page 77 is just information from the City of Winnipeg's general assessment valuation of income producing properties. We can certainly touch on this if there's any questions. But with that, we'll conclude our presentation and welcome any questions from the board or from the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bruggen. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I'd like to address the square footage discrepancy first, Mr. Van Bruggen. The city has 23,264 square feet assessed. The 2020 income and expense mailer that was submitted notes 23,306 square feet. The commercial rent roll that was submitted notes an area leased of 24,307 square feet. So why have you plucked this 2017 income and expense mailer, which shows a lower leasable area, and have you verified this in any way?
No. So we've used the information from the income expense mailer, so that 23,279 square feet. And then if we go to the rent roll, just give me one moment here. I apologize.
What page, Mr. Van Bruggen?
So the rent roll will be starting at page 34. You're right, actually. So I take a look at the rent roll. There's 26,249 square feet. 717 Haro is on a 715, which is the family medical, is on a separate area. So that's 3,000 square feet. So you're correct. So that area should be, you're right. It does look like the city was correct on that area. So I do apologize.
The master rent roll that you've supplied is different than mine as of a different date. The biggest discrepancy that I see is in Unit 102, Recovery of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
That was a $16 a foot net lease as of December 2020, or at least what was submitted to the city. Why is it showing $7.90 on your rent roll? Do you know?
So this is as of April 1st, 2021, as indicated on the top on page 34. In terms of the difference for the area, I'm just taking a look here.
The difference in the rent.
They're different in the rent, yeah. I'm not sure why there's that. That difference exists.
Do you think that's a reasonable approximation of market value for this space at $7.90, knowing what you know about the building and the other rents?
Again, I don't really have enough information to make a determination one way or another on that rent. So yeah, I agree. $7.90 does look a little low. However, that is what they have indicated on the rent roll when we're taking a look at it, and that was as of April 1st, 2021.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Wesley, I just look at the whole picture, your presentation, the city's presentation, and the things that jump out at me in regards to valuing the subject property. And I'm just going to mention a couple of them. And that is that, your gross rents compared to the city's, $150,000 difference. They're on the high side, you're on the low side. And in regards to NOIs, there's a difference between the city and you, $172,458. So as I go through, or as you do evaluations for subject properties and come before the board, there's a difference between your presentation, the city's presentation, $3 million. When you do evaluations, you should have some checks and balances, whether it be NOIs, whether it be the rate per square foot. But you mentioned also one thing about a direct sales comparison approach. And you had stated that you mentioned a few properties and the rate per square foot, you were happy with that $185 to $200 a square foot applicable to the subject property, which equates to your value of 4.4. So these are the questions that we as panel members go through. So, but when you do presentations, do you not look at the value that you've concluded?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And does anything jump out at you in regards to the values?
So, and your point is absolutely, we certainly do take a look at the value and that's why we actually did the reconciliation. So we valued using the income approach, and then we took a look at the reconciliation because we certainly want to make sure, see how other office properties in the market line up with the request. Because, it's easy as you're moving through each of the parameters to end up in a situation where each parameter changes, and if you don't look at them as a whole, you can end up with a value that's out of line with the overall market. So that's why we did the last check of saying, what are similar sales selling for within the market, and how does a request line up for that? And that's why so we're not necessarily looking to value the property on a direct sales comparison approach, but we're saying, does that secondary check line up? The big difference between the cities and ours is really in relation to the treatment of the bank space. So the city's got 6,136 square feet, assessed at $28 a square foot. It's our position that because we saw that lease ending for the Assiniboine Credit Union, anyone buying the property would know that lease is ending for Assiniboine Credit Union. There certainly is more risk on that, and we certainly know that that would make it challenging to lease within the market, especially a space that's that size. So again, when we're taking a look at it, we felt that the most reasonable way to value that space would be as a typical office, looking at it as a typical office, applying a typical rental rate, which we looked at from the market and derived a number of comparables from the area. So we have looked at each one of the parameters. We've certainly looked to support our request, either that be through the actual vacancy rate within the building, tied to market reports, the leasing within the building, tied to leasing of similar properties, as well as looking back and saying, what are similar sales of properties selling for? The other thing I think to note is when we took a look at the value of the property, the value from the city, the value that equates to a value of over $321 a square foot, which is very high for an office property. We certainly don't see office properties selling for that. I mean, taking a look at what we see within the market, that is quite a high value on a per square foot basis for the office property. So again, that kind of highlights, that's where our differences lie and why we feel that value is a little bit high.
Mm-hmm. I see where you're going. The unfortunate part is we don't evaluate on a direct sales comparison. We do it on an income approach, and that's where the value of the property lies. The other, I guess, the big thing is that this property has got 1.6 acres, so you won't find that anywhere else, probably, compared to some of the comparables and the direct sales. So that, all the factors have to be taken into consideration. So I'm just, it leaves me with a lot of questions. So I thank you very kindly, Wesley. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Ms. Knight, do you have any questions? You are on mute.
My husband was using the snowblower, so it was making lots of noise in here. On page 15, you say after the date of assessment, April 1st, 2021, that ACU has moved out. Has anybody moved into that space since then?
So the last conversation we had, it did sound like they were looking at leasing to an office tenant. I believe it was a wealth management firm, but that I don't know. Like there are some discussions. I don't know where they were in the overall conversation.
So at this point, it's still empty.
As of the last email I had, it was still empty. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to follow up on that too. Mr. Kupfer, I'm going back to Mr. Kupfer just for clarification for my own self on the process. You've evaluated this as 6,000 plus square feet as a bank and the remainder being office. Does knowing that the bank is no longer there, does that change the valuation from the city's perspective? Like, would a supplementary notice get issued, or I'm kind of not understanding the process?
Yeah, so when there's a change in tenancy in that way, a permit does come through to the department, and we follow up and make those changes. And there could be some changes to the model based on that. All of that being said, from the information that I've reviewed, I don't believe that the new rents that are going to come in are going to be significantly different from what ACU is paying. As part of the submission by Mr. Van Bruggen, it includes the asking rents for the vacant space, which is consistent with what's already being rented. If there's a significant change, a change in tenancy, we would make that model change. But of course, we want to review the income and expense information. For all we know, they could come in and rent for the same amount or substantially even higher. If ACU's been there for a long time, then there's a good chance that the rent that they're paying is an older rental amount.
Okay, so assuming then at the end of December this year, at the end of 2022, or you get the new income, you'd get the next income and expense mailer would be for what year? 2021 or 2022 would be the next one?
We've already got 2021s. The next one we'll be getting is for 2022, and we'll get.
And that's where it would show, right, on the vacancy side, or on the ACU being vacant from the property is what I mean.
It should be on the income and expense mailer, but before that, we should get an occupancy permit to come through our system, which will show a new occupant taking over the space, if that is the case. And we would analyze that occupant to see if they do qualify as a bank or credit union. And if they don't, then we could reclassify it as OFS.
Okay. So it would just, as a matter of course, through your process, there could be adjustments to the assessment depending on what comes through on that next income and expense mailer, correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah, the property could be classified differently if we see this again in 2025, depending on what happens with the tenancy.
Okay. The question that I did have to Mr. Van Bruggen about the rent, that $790 rent, I also saw that as an outlier. You were using that in your model to come up with the $550 rent. That $790 rent accounted for 25% of the space included in your weighted average. So would you think that $1,550 rent is too low?
No. So if we turn to page 16, I'll just give the board a moment to get there.
Yeah, I'm there actually.
So we certainly took a look at the leasing from the property, but we also looked at leasing of the other similar properties within the area. So that $1,550 wasn't necessarily based strictly on the property rents. That was certainly one consideration we looked at, but also we took a look at what was other leasing, and we provided a number of leases there for the board's reference on the bottom of page 16. These are all leases of office spaces, OFS spaces that have been leased, lease rates starting in 2015, continuing to 2020, and we see again that these. When we took a look at, saw an average of $15.21, a median of $15, and a weighted average of $15.35. So
yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what the quality of this space is? We've heard that the space at 900 Harrow is very good quality. It's relatively new. Do you know anything about this space?
All these buildings.
Yeah.
So we know that these actually each one of these will correspond with the rents that the assessor is using. So a number of the rents that the assessor is using on page 4 to 7 of their brief.
Mm-hmm.
So again, these had been gathered from public information that the city had used already. So for another similar property. So we used that information and we took a look at what was in terms of located close to the subject property and would be reasonable. So again, I would only assume that these rents were all fed into the model and were used to generate a rental rate for the property.
Okay, that's a good assumption. I don't know if that's entirely the case, but that's a good assumption. Okay, so that's how you arrived at your
correct.
Yeah.
So we certainly, we're not looking at this information in outside of, we certainly are looking at other factors when we're trying to determine what a reasonable rental rate is for the property. And regardless, even when we take a look at the property, we know that the property has been assessed with a blended rate of $19.21. We only really see 2 rents that are above that, and they're of much smaller spaces that are above the $19.31. They account for just a little less than 800 square feet of the building. The majority of the other rents within the building range, and again, you're right at that $7.90. It is a little low. But even if we look at the assessor's information, they range from $16 to $18.50. So we're anywhere between 75 cents a square foot to a buck 70, a couple bucks less than what's been assessed and applied to that property. So again, even when we take a look,
I note that in previous methodologies you've relied on the median, so that was kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, so I mean, we certainly have looked at the median in other cases, but again, I think when we measures of central tendency really depend on the factors that go into it. So, for example, if you have outliers, the median is certainly high. Rents that are particularly high or low, a median is a good parameter to use. In this case, if we're seeing that smaller spaces are renting at different rental rates compared to larger spaces, again, maybe a weighted average would be a more appropriate measure of central tendency to use to account for those size differences as we look at the building, as we look at the spaces. Just given the fact that the average space within the building, I believe is, I think it's about 1,300 or 1,400 square feet. So I'll have to run the numbers, but the average, when we take a look at the rent roll for the building, we can see that the majority of spaces are over 1,000 square feet. So again, how would that apply to the property?
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying about the small spaces, and even comparing within this sampling that you've provided. We have unit 202 at 1,200 square feet paying $18.50. And we have unit 205 at 510 feet paying $18. So there doesn't always seem to be a rationale to,
for sure.
It's not rational, if you know what I mean. It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, the challenge, and one of the challenges is that there's always a variety of factors. It depends on when the rent is signed, the length of the lease being another factor, a consideration, the location of the building being a consideration. There are, and even when it comes down to tenant improvements, how much tenant improvements are being put in the space could have an impact on the rent. So, there's a lot of factors. So as we take a look at it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I have no additional questions, and so now I understand you do have rebuttal evidence.
We do indeed.
Okay, let's just get to that. Okay, does everybody have it in front of them?
Yeah, good to go.
Yep.
Okay, then go ahead, Mr. Van Bruggen.
Thank you very much, and Madam Chair. And I do apologize. I'm looking at it now, and I realize I have not page numbered the pages, so I do apologize about that. Hopefully, if everyone has a PDF version, we can navigate by PDF page. But I do apologize in getting this sent. But if the board can turn with me to page 12 or page 2, we'll get started. This is in rebuttal to the bank leases. So again, one of the factors that we take a look at when we take a look at the rents, we certainly do feel that those bank leases are not indicative of the property, mainly because the property no longer has a bank, being our major concern. When we take a look at it, the first lease at 1219 Grant Avenue, we provided a picture there. And if the board turns with me down to page 3, we can see this property is located directly across from Grand Park Shopping Center. So one of the factors when we take a look at a bank, where a bank is typically banks like to either be located in close proximity to another bank, or they like to be located in close proximity to a retail space, such as Grand Park. So again, when we take a look at the subject property, so we're located Pembina Highway on Harrow. We don't actually have direct access off Pembina Highway. You have to access it from Harrow. Again, we would say that this property would be probably considered superior in nature. As well, this bank is still currently functioning as a bank based on what we were able to determine. So compared to the subject property where that's not the case. Page 4, we have the next one, 2785 Pembina Highway. So this is a BMO that's located within the property. So when we take a look, this is probably located in a slightly more similar location. This is located on Pembina Highway. However, another fact, certainly this is an ongoing bank that's being utilized where the subject property no longer has the credit union occupying it. Page 5, we have 270 St. Anne's, 2799 Pembina Highway. Again, similar idea. We have 2 TD banks located here. Again, banks tend to rent at different parameters. We see that these are standalone units, not located within another building. And again, both of these are still functioning as banks. When we take a look at that, high visibility, the fact that they're still operating as such, longer term leases, we feel that these would not be comparable. Page 6, we have 1300 Pembina Highway. So this is a RBC. Again, a bank versus a credit union that's renting the space. We can see that there's some office space. This is this two-story Pembina. This is located right across on the Safeway along Pembina Highway there. Strong location. A lot of cars going by. Good and retail area within the location there. On page 7, we have 230 Portage Ave. So this is located downtown. So this is the Canadian Western Bank. You can see that this bank rental rate is a little bit lower. But again, when we take into consideration downtown office or the downtown bank would not be particularly similar to the subject property, and mainly because the subject property is no longer a bank. And then finally, we have page 8. We have 235 Marion Street. This is a Scotia Bank that's rented the building. Again, when we take a look at this would probably be considered a little differently as well, mainly because the subject property is a credit union and is no longer functioning as a credit union, whereas this is still an ongoing bank. Page 9, now we switch over to talk about the rental rate, office rental rate. And if the board will turn with me to page 9. So here we have comparables 44, 82, 2, and 9. So all these are from 600 St. Anne's Road. So you can see the rental rates that this building is generating ranges that the assessor has indicated ranges from $18 to $22 per square foot. This is a more of a medical style building. When we take a look at it, mostly medical type tenants within the building. So again, when we take a look at that, for the most part, our property is comfortably an office building. We feel that these rental rates would be, again, it's fairly well known that medical buildings rental rates tend to be a little higher than what we would see for typical office buildings. So again, we feel that these would not be great comparables to look at when considering our property. Page 10, we have 1250 Waverly Street. So when we take a look at this, again, primarily medical, there's a surgical clinic within the property, a number of paramedical units within the property, physio, massage, what have you. I believe there's a dental center within the property. Again, so when we take a look at the rental rate for this, we can see $19 per square foot. We feel that would be probably a little on the high side compared to what we'd be expecting for the subject property. Page 11, we have 1001 Corden Avenue. So this is a newer, so the property, great location on Corden Ave, newer property. You can see the finish of the property is quite nice. So this third floor space rented at $22.50. Again, when we take a look at the property, just considering the location, considering the type of building that this is, we feel that would probably be a little bit higher than what could be achieved for the subject property. Page 12, we have Provencher Boulevard. So this is actually located right across the bridge there in St. Boniface. When we take a look, we can see that there's two spaces. This is unit 1300, or 113 and 114. Again, we take a look at the building. We can see that there's actually a retail component within the bottom of the building. This is a great location, St. Boniface, high foot traffic through the area. So again, we take a look at those rental rates. It would be our opinion that those rental rates would probably be more indicative of rental rates for retail properties compared to what you'd be expecting for office properties that you'd be finding typically more so on a second or third floor, particularly in an area where you have a number of pedestrians that would be walking around. Page 15 or page 13 of the board will turn. So this is 1450 Corden Ave. So here we have we see unit 3 at 1450 Corden Ave. So these units encompass both main and second floor space. That rental rate is $20.25. So this would be more of a blended rent, in our opinion, for that space for main floor and second floor space compared to what we'd be kind of combination between retail and office compared to what we'd be looking at for our property would be primarily office. Page 14 is 25 Vermilion Road. Here we see, so this is a space located within a shopping center. This is rented at $21.50 per square foot. So again, given the location within a shopping center, we feel that would generate, there'd be more competition for this space for both retail and office tenants, and accordingly would generate a higher rental rate. Page 20, and sorry, that would be comparable 15 within the assessor's brief. Page 16 is 235 Bonner Ave. So this is a dental clinic that had been leased within that space. So again, we take a look. Dental clinics typically rent at a higher rental rate compared to what we'd expect for the subject for typical office. So we feel that wouldn't be a reasonable comparable to use. And then finally, on page 17, we have 2512 and 2536 Main Street. So this is a Shoppers Drug Mart as well as the Cinnabon Credit Union located right beside, and I believe there's an office building located in the back there and a convenience store. So these are more retail in nature. Again, when we take a look at page 20, these are comparables 56, 38, 16, and 87 from the assessor's brief. It would be our position that when we take a look at these, that these would not be as comparable to the subject property. When we take a look at the configuration of the site, when we take a look at the other tenants that are on this space within that location. Page 21, we've provided the excerpt from the assessor's brief with those leases removed. And when we take a look on page 23, we can see that from that information, we calculate an average of $15.07 and a median of $14.75 per square foot based on the leasing.
Pardon me.
So overall, again, it's our opinion that when we take a look at the rental rates for the banks, for the retail rate, for the office space, that assessed rent of $19.32 is high. Considering the leasing from the property as well as leasing from the leasing brought forward by the assessor, as well as the leasing M&P has utilized when we're taking a look at the property. Finally, just for the board's reference, page 24. On page 24, we provide value request. We have a value request for the board's reference, just in the event that you do determine that the rental rate should be changed. Here we look at the rental rate. Here we do feel that bank space shouldn't be assessed as a bank space given the fact that they're no longer occupying the building. However, as mentioned by the assessor had indicated, well, it's just a rental rate, but it's not just a rental rate that's applied. It's also a different vacancy rate and a different capitalization rate that's applied to bank spaces. So it's not simply just a matter of saying, well, any new tenant might be paying the same rental rate. Well, again, we don't know until that space leases, but what's a larger consideration is we know that banks are assessed with different vacancy rates as well as different capitalization rates. So here we provided that information to the board using the blended rental, using a rental rate of $19.32 for the bank space, a 6% vacancy rate, 6.45% capitalization rate, resulting in a value of $6,180,000. Again, it's our position that this is not. We feel that this would be a little bit high, but we did provide that there for the board's reference in the event that calculation was looked for. With that concludes our conclusion, and we welcome any questions from the board or from the assessor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
I do have one, thank you. I thought I heard you state, Mr. Van Bruggen, that some of the comparables we were using had a medical component. And as a result, they would generally rent for more or see higher rents because of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, typically, I think medical buildings typically rent for a higher rate when you have a number of medical tenants located within the property.
Where the subject property has a massage therapist, an orthotics, and an MD located within it.
So the massage there. So when we take a look at those spaces, they're quite a bit smaller, and we do see they are renting for a higher rental rate. So again, I think when we take a look at the combination, both the size of space and the type of tenant, again, we recognize it. Whether or not that's appropriate for the whole building, I would agree. I would disagree. I would suggest that's not necessarily the case, as it's clearly an office building. But again, we're taking a look at what the most comparable rents would be when looking at the spaces for the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Merritt?
I have none. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight.
I do have one. So we know that a lot of banks have become, gone with the wind, right? All banks are making their foot pattern a lot smaller. But some of the banks that were in existence, do you feel that some of those have been rented out as just office space, or has some been rented out as medical space?
I mean, I can't. So I'm going to preface this by saying I can't speak to knowledge across the board of all banks in all situations. I will say when we take a look at banks, depending on the location of the property, we see typically they're rented as when they move and they're re-rented. They're either rented as office space or like typical office space, or as retail space for a retail tenant, depending on the location. Particularly for those standalone banks in high traffic areas, they tend to be attractive to retail tenants. I certainly know of some that have been configured as well. When we take a look at others more in office buildings, we certainly see an office tenant looking to move into that space.
Okay. So obviously my background is banking, and I do know that some branches have been turned into medical space. Not many, but some. That's why I was asking the question. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Mr. Kupfer, do you have rebuttal evidence?
I have no rebuttal evidence.
Okay. And is there a desire for summation?
Just a short one. I'd just like to reiterate that I think this is a very well located property, and in consideration of the master rent roll that was submitted to the city, using the $16 rent, not the $7.90 rent for that one particular space, I believe our modeled assessment is fairly well supported.
Thank you. Mr. Van Bruggen?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think when we take a look at the property, one of the major considerations that we need to look at is we're always looking at what's the correct market value for the property. And in a situation where a bank has been lost, and we know that the city has indicated that banks, and again, I don't think it's any surprise, banks tend to sell at a higher value per square foot because of the rents they're generating. But when that's gone, of course, that's going to have an impact in what the overall value of that property is. There's a vacancy for the space. Bank spaces tend to be a little more difficult in the past, have been a little more difficult to lease, as well as the fact that it's unlikely that they are going to get another bank tenant within the property, and they're going to be looking at leasing it to another type of tenant. There is certainly going to be an impact in terms of the rental rate, as well as desirability on that site. We know that the overall property has been assessed with a rental rate that is quite a bit higher, and only in 2 instances, much smaller spaces are actually generating a rental rate that's similar. For the most part, the property is generating a rental rate that is lower than that assessed rent. The last consideration is that MNP has looked at sales of office buildings. We have double checked it. We value the property using the income approach to value. But then we've taken a look at some sales to see what the impact of that is. And we can see that office properties are selling for quite a bit lower than what that assessed value is. So again, we are not saying that a sales comparison approach has been implied. There's certainly a lot of comparisons or considerations, but it's certainly a point to be looked at when we're determining what's a reasonable valuation for this property. And in that case, I believe that we have highlighted a number of instances where we can suggest the property has been overassessed. With that, MNP respectfully requests the board, when taking a look at the property, to reduce that value. And with that, we conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Bruggen and Mr. Sharples. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Can we take 5?
Yes, let's take 5, and then we will move on to Mr. Neufeld. So, Jason, have you talked to Mr. Neufeld? Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We're about to deal with item number 7 on our docket. And before we do, Mr. Robinson, can you please affirm Mr. Neufeld's testimony?
Mr. Neufeld, please state your full name.
Rocky Neufeld.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 7, 1200 Henderson Highway. Mr. Kupfer, when you're ready, please.
That is roll number 04-000-147800. The address is 1200 Henderson Highway. This is an owner-occupied access credit union.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Would you mind giving the file number? Because all the electronic data only has the file number on it.
22-3375 for your reference. It said constructed in 1980. It's all on one story. We have a leasable area of 7,740 square feet and a modeled 2023 assessment of $1,660,000 that I'll be recommending be maintained today. Page 2 of my brief shows we have no recent sales for the property. My understanding is this has been held for a while by Access Credit Union. It's supplied an overhead as well as a Google Street View photo of this property. It's on the corner of Henderson and Hawthorne, I believe. The rent comparables table is the same as submitted for other bank properties we've been discussing today. No changes, showing an average of a little over $26 a foot with our min-max between 18 and 36. As I previously stated, this is an owner-occupied property, so I have no rents to compare that to for the subject. Page 4 of my brief shows our modeled workup. We're assessing 4,020 square feet of main floor space at $23.62. And then we've got 3,720 square feet of substandard basement. This is the type of coating we would put towards storage space generally. In my experience comes out between about $4 and $5 a foot. So this one seems to be categorized correctly at about $4.40. Everything else is standard for our bank model parameters here, including 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall, and in this case, a capitalization rate of 6.3%, which is deriving that value of $1,660,000 using the income approach. No other surprises here in the brief. I've included the income and expense mailer at the end, which was submitted properly. Again, confirming that this is an owner-occupied property. They've included their COVID questionnaire, stating that there may be some impact, but it's not yet known. And I think they paid about $10,000 in extra expenses for shields and some temporary security. So that's all the information I have for this property. And at this time, I will be recommending that model value be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Neufeld, do you have questions of the assessor's evidence?
Yes, I do. Firstly, just for the record, page 4, was the valuation all done by your model?
I believe so.
Well, I mean, if you believe so, I mean, did you change anything in the model yourself on this, or is this how it came out?
I did not make any changes to this.
Thank you. Now, the city has a category called bank. Why do you have a category called bank?
Because it's a bank.
Well, I'm sorry, but why do you have a category for a bank that is the same physical property as retail?
Well, it's the same reason you would have a different category for a medical clinic, for example. These are different properties.
Okay, well, and what would be different from a bank than retail?
You're talking about the physical space, or what would they lease for differently? Can you specify your
Well,
question?
I'm just talking about physically. What's the difference?
Or what kind of retail space are you talking about? Like a Best Buy comparing to a bank?
General retail, one story retail.
You'll have to be more specific.
Well, okay, let's talk about a specific example. 270 St. Anne's Road.
Mm-hmm.
Was that rebuilt, or was that the old country kitchen building that was redone?
This was constructed in 2004. I can't tell you what it was before that.
Okay, so if it was something else before then, say a restaurant, and now it's a bank, what makes it different physically?
The building was constructed in 2004.
Okay, so you don't know the answer to that. What difference is there? Like a different framing, a different foundation, anything like that?
My understanding is there are many differences between a retail building and a bank building. It'll obviously greatly depend on the type of retail building that you're talking about.
Well, okay. I mean, I just asked what type. Framing? Is framing different?
It could be. Again, depends entirely on the retail building that you're discussing.
How would it be different?
Well, compared to what retail building are you talking about?
Any retail building, a 2x6 framing. What would be different for a bank?
Well, is this bank 2x6 framing?
Well, how would it be different? Do you know whether it would be different or not, or you're just speculating?
It would depend on the type of retail establishment, as I said multiple times now.
All right, most all retail properties have a flat roof with membrane. Is this any different?
It doesn't appear to have a flat roof based on the photograph.
Okay, well, most retail are slab on grade or poured concrete foundation. Does this have anything different?
Yeah, this has a basement.
That's a poured concrete foundation. How is that different?
How is a poured concrete foundation different than slab on grade?
No, how is a poured concrete foundation in a bank different from a poured concrete foundation for retail? Is there a difference?
If they both had identical poured concrete foundations, then those foundations would be the same, but you also just stated that retail is often on slab on grade, which this is not. So that would be one of the differences.
I don't think that's what I asked. Okay, let's try something really, really simple. Most all retail have aluminum frame doors and on them. Is any different for a bank?
I can't see the doors in the photograph here.
Okay. How about windows? Any difference in the windows?
Yeah, I would expect the windows would be different.
Like what? Are they going to be bulletproof?
I would expect they'd be reinforced beyond a retail standard, yes.
Can you put a bank in a retail strip mall?
Yes, you could.
Okay. Now your rents here, where did who put these together on page 3?
These are submitted to the city through the income and expense mailers.
I understand that. Did you insert them here, or did you just put in a list that was prepared?
I put this list into the brief.
And when you put the list in, did you review these to determine whether or not they had any sort of creative financing or tenant inducements amortized into the leases?
Oh, tenant inducements aren't a factor that would be taken into account for determining market value. The municipal board's already ruled on that multiple times.
No, they haven't.
Yes, they have.
And that's not the question I asked. They ruled on tenant improvements because Dave Saunders 20 years ago tried to double dip on non-recoverables and tenant inducements. That's what they ruled on.
No,
On the value of the market value of the building. That's what they ruled on. I was there. Now, answer the question. Did you review to see if there were any tenant inducements or creative financing involved in any of the leases?
No, we wouldn't include that as it's not an assessable factor.
Okay, so I'll take that as a non-responsive answer again. And why your the basement space in this particular building has been assessed as rentable. Is it separately demised?
Defined separately demised. You're saying, is there an extra access from the exterior?
It's its own access. That's correct.
I'm not sure if it has its own access.
Okay. Is it comply with building code for human occupancy?
I haven't inspected the space. I can't tell you if it complies with building code for occupancy. It's being modeled as storage space, so I would suggest that's how it was built.
Do you have any rents in your brief for storage space?
No, I don't.
As to the capitalization rates, where would this fit in your page 6 model?
We do not track bank properties, so generally they tend to fall between an office and a retail, generally on the lower end.
So you have no separate line item for banks?
That is quite clear.
How many bank investment sales have occurred in the last few years?
I couldn't give you a number for that.
Well, if a bank has a separate capitalization rate, you're saying that you don't know if you even had any sales?
We do have sales. I said I can't give you the specific number, actually.
Well, okay. You said you don't even know if any existed. Is that still the case? Have there been any investment sales of banks?
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, then new question. Have there been any investment sales of banks?
Define investment sales.
A bank that was sold with a rent in place to an investor who bought it for the revenue stream.
And now define recently, or just ask the question better in the first place.
Okay, I think we both know what Mr. Neufeld's trying to get at. Mr. Kupfer, are you able to answer the question?
Yes, banks do sell. I can't give you a specific number of how many have sold based on, I don't even know how many years he's inferring here, to be honest.
Okay, so Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Kupfer doesn't know how many have sold.
Okay. We could have started that in the beginning and got on with this. Now, if you have a separate category in valuation for banks, how do you deal with the changing trends in banks?
We follow the income and expense information that's submitted to us, and if there are trends in changes in rents, for example, then those would be reflected in those.
Well, do you track bank downsizing?
We track bank downsizing. No, we don't track that.
So if the major chartered banks are reducing and closing the number of banks and having fewer, and the credit unions are amalgamating and doing the same thing, how does that reflect in market value for demand?
I don't believe it would.
But wouldn't there be demand for fewer banks?
I haven't seen any evidence suggesting there's demand for fewer banks.
Well, okay, but you are coming here as the assessment department's expert witness on bank valuation, and so you don't know the answer to that question then?
Well, the question didn't make any sense, really.
Can I just add something, Madam Chair? There's a difference between banks and branches of banks. Maybe that would help you answer that question.
Yeah, my understanding is there's been a consolidation largely amongst credit unions. I'm not aware of any change in demands towards banks or credit unions.
Thank you for that assistance. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Merritt, do you have questions?
I have none for the time being. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
I do not. Thanks.
Thank you, and neither do I. So go ahead, Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you. So 1200 Henderson, when I first started working for it, was a crosstown civic credit union site, and today it's gone through. They've gone through several mergers with credit unions, and currently there's 3 larger credit unions that are merging, consolidating, and obviously the need for branch locations will change. And this is just a feature of a market. If you accept that a bank is a separate market, you're going to be decreasing demand. Now, if the premise is that a bank is not retail, it's not office, it's a bank, that means lower demand means lower value, lower rents, and higher caps. If a bank is just part of the grand retail mix, then it's a different issue. So I'm just submitting that the assessment department can't have it both ways. Decide if it's retail or office, or decide if you want a bank. Because if it is a bank, we have to deal with shrinkage. And every bank is going through the same thing. You walk into your branch today, what do they tell you? What's the first thing they say? You know, you can do that online. And that's the way the world is going with banks as a separate market. And the other great misinformation about banks, well, 2 misinformations. They can use a retail premise. There's nothing special. They're not bulletproof. They're not built like an Italian bank that's going to have an armed guard and bulletproof glass because they have so many robberies. They're just retail operations. And the second issue is when they do sell, and by the way, there has been 1 investment sale of a bank in the last decade. It sold twice. It didn't sell because it was a wonderful piece of real estate. It sold because the lease was guaranteed by CIBC, and the vendors thought and purchasers thought that this was a great secure investment backed by a AAA international strength covenant. That's not accessible. And so what we're trying to do is just bring some reality to the situation. It's just another retail operation. And there's nothing special and different about it. In this case of this bank, it was built in 1980 at a time when paper was required to track all of your transactions. The basement was required because that's where they had to have their paper storage. Everything's gone to electronic. Right now, the basement is the storage place for Christmas decorations. And that's going to be true of all the old credit unions, all of crosstowns. I've been working for them since 2003. And the first time I walked into a site, it was full of paper. The last couple of, after the first decade, they emptied it out, and it's obsolete. They can get by without the basement. And the basement adds no utility to the market. It adds no value to the market because people don't rent basements. What it was important for at the time it was built was added storage space for the property above. That is now obsolete. So, I mean, when we look at this, we have to consider it with on that basis. Now, when we did our rent workup on page 1, we put a value of 20 and 5, and that's really just to deal with the fact that the basement is there. And want to know the truth is the math works out better because you get more shortfall out of it. The reality is you should just look at the main floor, 4,000 feet. And if you take a look at our rent, that's a little under $25 a foot. And with it, you get a little bit of utility in the basement to store your drink empties and your Christmas decorations. The vacancy, we looked at retail as a vacancy because I think virtually every bank that's come back on the scene will be retail or local office, and local office meaning like an insurance office, medical office, dental office, is generally falls under the retail category because it competes for the same dollar. It's in the same space. Like there's purpose-built office. It's not purpose-built office. Like 3-story offices, it falls in retail. We looked at the Johnson report for vacancy, and the Johnson report is a very good document. It's transparent and it has all the data. I keep it here at my desk all the time. And in retail, for example, there are 25 pages of data on all the retail operations in the city, so it's transparent. And what we did is looked at it, first of all, in the general Winnipeg retail, which was 4.7%. And I'm trying to think who put East Kildonan in here. I don't think that's East Kildonan. I don't know if Johnson tracks that particular section of the city. That would be North Kildonan, and they do. So it's actually a bit higher than that. Now, the problem with the retail vacancy, all the reporters, is that the impact of COVID isn't quite clear yet because the retail vacancy is based on paid vacancy. So there were a lot of people who got assistance and or had the money to keep paying their rents, but were no longer open. And as their leases expire, they don't come back. They won't be coming back, not all of them. And retail is coming for a shakeup, and it's on the 5-year lease stagger. So same with office. But we haven't taken that into account because that will be felt as the years go on, and we'll see if there's any displacement for new users, new types. The home delivery market really made a major impact on retail, and it picked up a massive market share. And it's a question of how much of that the walk-in retail is getting back. Our calculation of shortfall was just our estimate of what the actual is in this site. And we do apply non-recoverables because that's the reality of the world. We don't. When any investment property is being considered to be sold, or they look at the books, the bottom line is the bottom line. It isn't an artificial line. It's how much money goes back into the owner's pocket. So non-recoverable expenses don't occur every year. They occur as you have vacancies typically, and they're stabilized. So if you consider a 5-year lease and you're going to take a couple months empty on that, you're going to have 1 bad year, 5 good years, and followed by 1 bad year. So the idea is to put a factor in to cover the vacancies. On our page 39 and 40 is a workup of Colliers managed properties, and these are a variety of users, office, retail, and industrial. And we've just calculated the non-recoverables. And this is money that the owner doesn't get and that he can't recover. That comes right off the bottom line. And the mean there is 9.81, and the median got clipped. It's about 7%. 7.3%, I think. And you can see that there's various properties, good years, and then followed by bad years, et cetera. That is just the nature of property management. A great example, page 40, about 2/3 of the way down, 1631 St. Anne's Road. There is a bank in that mall, the Toronto Dominion Bank. And it's just a normal retail space. And 1 year, their non-recoverables were 14.4% because of a turnover. The following year, they were at 0.41% because there was stabilization. And in upcoming years, it will change. That is the necessity for having a non-recoverable factor in all leases. The entire world applies non-recoverables at or about what we have here. And the only entity in the world that doesn't is the city of Winnipeg, who want to change the rules. Well, they can't change the rules because they don't set the standards. The market does. So that their assertion of 3% is incorrect and unsupported. And I probably made this speech a few hundred times, and every time I do it, I think I'm getting better at it. But anyway. Well, the going to capitalization, again, there's nothing special. There's nothing wonderful about a bank other than the covenant. But we can't tax the covenant because that's an intangible, because that's a business value. That's not a feature of the market. What you have to pretend is that, no, it's not bank renting this who have a pretty good financial security. Maybe it was me renting it, and then you cap it at 10%. You don't do that. You look at the market. Now, Colliers has a cap rate report. We don't track banks because nobody does. Because, as I said, one sold in the entire city of Winnipeg over the last 10 years, sold twice. The way we look at it is on page 10 is we do look at mostly retail, because you can see that the suburban office is skimpy in Winnipeg. There's just not a lot of data. There are so few buildings that are legitimate suburban office that it's not reliable. Now, looking at the retail, you can see that the low is 6%, the high is 6.75, depending on how you're classing this. What we do on page 2 is look at the lowest rate. So this is the best product, and the best product, this, by the way, the bank is not the best product. The best product would be, a brand new twin anchors, power center, twin anchor with Costco, not a Rona, I was going to say Home Depot, or a real draws, and then users in between. But now the difference between this site and those sites are what we look at. Now, in this case, we have a mixed use zoning on the site because it was built in a residential area. they still have part of the zoning as residential, which forbids any sort of future development. And if it weren't part of the original lot, parking would not be permitted. So it is a legal non-conforming use. What it really means is that if the bank goes away and someone wants to put up a different operation, they're going to have some problems with getting approval. You don't automatically get it because the last use had it. That's not the way planning works. And our mind, that was a negative. The basement, of course, is just wasted space. The cost to heat it and clean it, and look after it, is a drag now. You know, you've been better off with a slab floor at this point. The size, it's and siting, it's the concept of 4,000 square feet on 21,000 square feet in the siting. This probably wouldn't be the way you would site modern retail, not up front like this. It would be set back, parking up front. So that would be the optimal design now for any sort of a retail operation, whether it be a bank or not. So these are minor issues, all of them. Year built, we look at the concept of the assessment department uses effective year built. We look at three factors: the actual year built, the quality, and the condition. And all of these go into the creation of to the cap rate. There's no artificial way of I'm going to change the year of your building and therefore make it change its value. You got to look at everything. You can't change the age of a building. You can't make the foundation new. It is what it is. So you look, that's one factor. It's a small one. The quality, so it's the quality of construction at the time. And I think I spoke too soon when I started asking questions. They're not building pitched roofs like this anymore. This is a bit of an old style. The flat roof is the way to go. So this wasn't a top-notch quality building. And condition is good, but it's dated. And so we're looking at about 7.25% for this, for a value $1,170,000. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
Thank you. The value that you're proposing today, this workup, was this done by yourself or somebody else?
This was an office product.
So was it put together by you or someone else?
This was an office product. It was a collaborative operation.
Collaborative, okay. The sale that you've referenced multiple times now, this is 739 Henderson we're talking about, correct?
No, it's not. It's on Portage Avenue.
Oh, so there have been multiple sales then of banks over the last little while then.
Well, just a second here. I think I have a point of order. I asked you earlier if you knew any sales. Now all of a sudden you've come up with 739 Henderson. Were you bidding a bit evasive earlier?
No, I was able to find it during your very long presentation.
That's too bad you didn't find it before you submitted.
Oh, here we are. What was the property that you were referencing?
I'm not bringing it into evidence. I just mentioned it.
But you did state that there were no bank sales, no verifiable bank sales within recent.
No, I said there was one.
There was one.
Yes.
So you're not counting this other one as a bank or as a sale or as an investment property?
I haven't seen it.
Okay. What was the capitalization rate derived on the sale that you did reference?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, can you give me your figures that you used there? Your final value?
$1,170,000.
Okay. All right. I thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
Just as a point of clarification, my history, my background is banking. Paper has not left the banks yet. We have to hold them for 7 years. So yes, paper is getting to be a lesser point, but we are still holding paper from 7 years ago. So just that's the only point I wanted to make. So basements are still very useful to a bank.
I'm very sorry, but I don't think that insertion of your own evidence is proper.
I'm okay. I'll take that. Just ignore my statement.
No, and I don't want to be disrespectful. I respect what you're saying. If you were listening to what I did say, is I've inspected the bank. It used to be full of paper. Now it's gone somewhere. Now it's gone.
Okay. So if I was out of order, I'm sorry.
No, I always appreciate comments.
Ms. Knight, do you have any
questions? No.
Okay. And I have no questions. Mr. Kupfer, is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. That concludes item number 7. We'll now move to item number 8. 1033 St. Mary's Road. Mr. Kupfer, whenever you're ready, please.
That is file number 22-3374, roll number 0802108040, street address 1033 St. Mary's Road. This is another bank property, 1-story, constructed in 1996. We have a leasable area of 6,333 square feet and a 2023 modeled assessment of $2,136,000. That will be recommended today. I'm showing on page 2 a 2014 sale of the property, valued at about $1,950,000. I've supplied photos for you, consistent with every other brief today. This one is currently occupied by Sunova. They're also the owners of the property, and then they rent out a small office section to Brio Insurance. I've included rent comparables for our bank section here. Again, no changes. The bank here is being modeled at $27.58. Again, we have substandard basement, this time at $5.42. And the Brio Insurance here, I believe we have is the A1 high quality finish at $21.89. And I believe they're renting at $18 a foot net from the credit union, as shown on the income and expense mailer. Everything here is standard through our model: 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall, and a capitalization rate of 5.95%. Gives us our value using the income approach of $2,136,000. Scrolling down, you can see the income and expense mailer that was submitted. Like I said, Brio Insurance has that 2,650 square foot area they're indicating, and that rent worked out to about $18 a foot I have in my notes. COVID questionnaire mentions some minor impacts, and again, expenses I think would be consistent with the last property that you would see: cleaning, face shields, maybe some extra security, that sort of thing. That's all the information that I have on this property, and at this time we're going to recommend that that 2023 assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes. Again, just for the record, page 4, was this done by the model?
Yes.
I got a really soft connection here.
Yes.
Okay. And Madam Chairperson, I hope it's safe to say that our debate from the first property carries over. We don't have to ask and answer those questions.
Yes.
Again. Okay. You mentioned a sale. Who was the sale between?
I don't know who the vendor was. The purchaser is the current owner.
Well, did the bank go through with this sale in terms of a consolidation of banks into a new organization?
Not clear.
Okay. Now, there's a rent in here for Brio. Have you inspected the site?
I haven't.
Do you know where Brio is located? In the building?
No.
What's the difference between the Brio space and the bank space?
One is occupied and run by Brio, and one is run by the bank.
Is there a difference in quality?
Likely.
Likely.
Yes.
without an inspection, you think there's a difference?
We know that there is a correlation
And-
with bank quality, finish, and what they rent for compared to OFSs in general.
So but you don't know where Brio is in the bank then, and nor have you inspected it, and you're assuming there's a quality difference.
Correct.
Okay. Are these rents on page 3? These appear to be the same ones that we saw earlier. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Brio, you said twice that it rents at $18. What's wrong with using that for the rent on your page 4?
I don't see anything wrong with using that as the rent for that finish on page 4.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
I have none at this point. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Ms. Knight.
Is there a separate entrance for the Brio? Do they entrance through the credit union entrance on your picture on page 3?
Can't 100% tell you based on the photos. I would guess that there is a separate entrance for a building this size, though.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions. So, Mr. Neufeld?
Thanks. Brio Insurance. No, wait, I'll just back up. Sonova, of course, took over this bank from a merger with another credit union, so there's no sale. As of this year, they're doing another merger with Crosstown, with Crosstown's group. So there will be, and Colliers is doing the workup for them. So we're quite familiar with their operations. Now, Brio is in the Sonova branches, and they do not have a separate entrance. They're part of the operation. You walk into the bank, you can go to Brio, you can go to the bank. They're in the same open area. There's no quality difference whatsoever. It's the same building. The only difference is that Brio is arm's length and pays rent, and that should be the rent for the entire site. That's what the market would demand, would seem to indicate. And I don't make assumptions. We look at the sites and go in there. So there's nothing different about it. We had given a thought to putting the whole thing at $18, which probably would make more sense on that, based on that. But it is a slightly smaller space, and the bank has a bit more care and control over the operation. We looked at this pretty much the same way we did as the last one, as a premium retail site, and whether you consider the basement or not, it pretty much indicates $25 in the upper level, 20 for Brio. Forget about the basement. Vacancy is a cross between retail and St. Vital. It averages at 4.5. We're staying in the neighborhood because one of the interesting things about banks and vacancies and locations is they don't just go up and say, I think St. Vital is the same as North Kildonan. Everybody uses software these days, and we can plot a site and you pump in demographics and you figure how much it's worth to your bank. Today, the data we can buy is incredible. It tells you how much the average person makes, how much their savings are, how much their pensions are worth. I don't know where they get the data from, but it's really pretty good. And that's what drives bank locations. So if one says, I would like to use rents from a different part of town, you're going to get different motivations if you want to be a bank. Now, if you want to be retail, then there's other factors that drive it. But all of this, would go into like a 3-hour presentations. We're just doing this rather simply, just not pretending, we're just treating it as just another retail site that can attract good rents. And we're at 25 and 18 essentially, and not really including the basement, but we've broken it out so that so that we've accounted for it. Incidentally, if we just put 25 on the upper and forgot about the basement, our value would be higher because the shortfall would be lower. That comes anyway to an NOI of 97,610. In this particular one, we've capped at 7%. And that's better than the last one because it's a better quality building. We've been in the building. It's sited better. It's Sabatel is a better location for most all retail operations. Just a bit more modern, will have a longer remaining economic life. So it's a minor changes, and of course, compared to the other one, it doesn't have that differential zoning. It has control of all of its own zoning under the C2. So that would cap at 7%, and our number is 1,394,000.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. I'm hoping you can tell us more about the business relationship between Brio and Sonova. My understanding is this isn't the only case where there's a Brio located inside of a Sonova.
I'm really having a hard time hearing you.
Can you speak to the business relationship between Brio Insurance and the owner, Sonova Credit Union? My understanding is there's Brio Insurance located in multiple Sonova Credit Union locations.
Oh yes, and that's correct. They have a business arrangement. They're not related to each other. Brio and Sonova just came to agreement to rent spaces in multiple branches of the Sonova, and they found themselves to be a complementary business. The hardest part of it was that Brio had to live with Sonova's hours, and that was a downside for them. But other than that, it's it's just a good business concept to bring complementary business together under one roof. Complementary, non-competitive.
If I'm remembering correctly, I've handled a Sonova property before that had Brio Insurance in it, and they were also renting for exactly $18 a foot net. So is this an agreed upon rate that they have for all properties, regardless of where they are or what the square footage is?
No, I've seen different rents on different sites. I can look them all up. It would just take some time, but I think that 18 is a fairly common number. I wouldn't disagree with that, and it's now.
Excuse me.
I can say that we've worked for Sonova for quite some time, and we do non-appeal valuation for them, and they have sought professional assistance on it from Colliers, and we have assisted them.
Do Sonova and Brio have a beneficial business relationship, in your opinion? Does one help the other by being both located in the same site?
Well, I think I was clear on that they find themselves to be non-competitive and complementary to each other. As far as sending business to each other, that would be forbidden by their regulations and quite improper to anyone to infer.
Which regulations?
Well, banks are governed by the Canadian Chartered Bank and their shareholders. So they have two levels of due diligence. They don't send preferential work out to anybody.
But they're located in the same building.
Sure.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean the bank manager says, I'll give you the loan if you'll go get it insured at Brio. That does not happen.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Neufeld, you're using 7% cap rate.
That's correct.
And the previous one was 7.25%.
That's correct.
Is that because of age?
A little bit, but I think the major factor is that the other one has some land that's has split zoning on the land, has some residential zoning on its parking, and that's considered a downward influence on, like, cap rates, the anticipation of future earnings. So if you want to do something on your site, you would be very, very more restricted on 1200 Henderson than you would be on 1033 St. Mary's. That's really the real reason. I think it's I'd say the zoning.
What you had mentioned about the sale of the property? Is that referring to the 2014 sale?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a Sonova at that point in time. It was a different branch that merged with Sonova, and they had to. I guess they changed title on it and they had to put a number on it. I'm just. I can probably just peg that down a bit more here. I just want to see my history on this. Yeah, see, my involvement didn't start with them until 2016, and just a small world. My in-laws' coffee shop is across the street, and it wasn't a Sonova. Sonova is based in Selkirk, and their branches initially were in north part of Winnipeg. And historically, it was an Assiniboine credit union prior to that, and that was the merger.
I have no further questions. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Madam.
you. Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have questions?
Yeah, I do. On your Rocky, you've got 8,211 square feet, and on the city, they've got 6,333 square feet.
Oh, I see that.
So I'm just a little confused. I tried taking off the basement. I don't know where the difference is coming in. The substandard basement 1121 on the city. You've got the basement as 2999.
It's the basement area that differs. Yeah. We were working off plans from that we got from the bank. I'm just thinking out loud that it might be a difference that the city took off the service area in the basement where the furnaces are. Sometimes they do that. We're doing this now for, like I said, for their current merger, and this came from their plans. That's all I can say. I'm going to just check one more database here.
Mr. Assessor, would you have any idea why?
I don't know.
Okay.
We note that we have the gross floor area as 8,985 and the lease floor area as 6,000.
Okay, maybe that's what it is. Maybe
yeah,
it is.
So it's a service.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be the furnace down there they took off.
Okay. All right. I'll let it go. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we're assuming it's the basement area, I'm just comparing the premises 2562. The main floor banking area seems to be the same. The insurance area is the same. So it is in that basement area. That's the difference. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I have no additional questions past those asked. That concludes item number 8. We'll now go to the last item on our agenda, item number 9, 2799 Pembina Highway. So, Mr. Kupfer, when you're ready, please.
This is file number 22-3403, roll number 03092985. Street address is 2799 Pembina Highway. There's 2 buildings on this property. We have 1 bank and 1 restaurant. They're both 1 story, I believe, constructed between 1996 and 1998. The same kind of time frame we've been discussing for most of these properties today. The total leasable area is 7,754 square feet. I believe that's between both buildings. And then we have a modeled 2023 assessment of $3,971,000 that I'll be recommending be maintained today. Page 2 of my brief gives you a good idea of what we're looking at here. You have the Burger King on the left-hand side, and then there's a TV on the right, and then a whole bunch of parking in the middle. Page 3 of my brief has a Google Street View taken from Pembina Highway. This is pretty far down south Pembina, past Bison Drive, by the way. I provided, again, the same bank comparables I'm sure you're tired of seeing now throughout the day. I've also included a restaurant comparable chart. Didn't do a lot of selecting here. This is more or less a very wide sample size. We have net leases in place for these buildings. Page 5 of my brief has the bank value workup. We have 4,505 square feet for the bank being modeled at just under $32 a foot, with 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, and $8 shortfall, and a capitalization rate of 5.8%. Page 6 of my brief has the restaurant stream, 3,249 square feet, renting at $32.53. You'll see, notice that it has a different vacancy. The restaurants get 6% by the model. Expenses get 3%. Expenses are 3%. Shortfall is $8, and the capitalization rate is quite similar at 5.85%. Page 7 of my brief has the income value summary showing those merged values and the total estimated market value of $3,971,000. I've included the income and expense mailer for this property. This is not owner occupied, so we have rents for both spaces here. Scrolling all the way down to the bottom to the commercial rent roll here, we're showing TD Canada Trust is renting at $30 a foot. Again, fairly consistent with what I've been telling you these types of banks rent for. And Burger King is renting at $32.50 a foot. So the restaurant is being modeled to within 3 cents of the actual net reported, and the bank is being modeled at about $2 higher than what's being actually reported. That's about all the information I have on the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes. So pages 5, 6, and 7 were all of these generated by the model?
Yes. Yes.
So we have 2 revenue streams here. Are these 2 properties on a separate title?
I don't believe they're on a separate title, as they're all part of the same role.
So they would be, if they were all brought to the market, they would be sold together, these multiple revenues?
I didn't do a title search.
Well, I think you just said you thought there was one title. Okay.
I would estimate so based on the configuration I said, but I did not do a title search.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, based on that assumption that they are in a single title, if they were brought to the market, could they be sold separately?
I'm not clear on that.
The rents on page 3, these are the ones we've already been presented. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So why in previous properties you seem to gravitate closer to the mean and the median, and in this case it is not at the mean or median?
All the values have been produced by the model.
Okay. And on the restaurant comparables, page 4, there's no indication of what these are. How would we know their applicability?
All I've stated is that they're restaurants.
Well, sit-down restaurants, fine dining restaurants, ice cream spots. Do we know this?
This is a combination of a wide variety of restaurants.
So, for example, number 17 is located in Polo Park, and you're saying that's comparable?
No, I'm saying this is a wide variety of different types of restaurants.
Okay. And the capitalization rates, again, done by the model, and we've already discussed the banks. Now, in terms of a restaurant, where does this fit on your model on of your columns and rows on page 8?
Both of the capitalization rates, I would say, are on the lower end of what's being reported.
No, but what row would they be in?
There's no restaurant row for you to reference.
And any knowledge of investment grade restaurants being sold in the 2 years preceding April 1st, 2021?
No, I have no knowledge of restaurant sales over the last 2 years.
Now, in terms of the modeling of this, how does it take into account that no one in their right mind was buying a restaurant in the middle of COVID? Why hasn't that come up?
I wouldn't agree with that, and I haven't been presented with any evidence to suggest it.
Okay, all right. You did see evidence of COVID, correct?
I have.
And you have seen evidence that restaurants were closed by the provincial government, the first business to be closed and the longest. So you don't dispute that, do you?
That was an aspect of it, yes.
Okay, so given that we had forced closures and of businesses, a lot who didn't survive, in your opinion, do you think 5.85% is reasonable?
Yes, I would say so.
Well, on that note, those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
I thank you. Just a little follow-up, Mr. Kupfer. The applicable cap rate that you're using for the Burger King, is that all model driven?
It is, yes. I haven't made any changes to.
No. Okay, I was just going to ask you. It seems to be quite low for a restaurant.
Well, that's reasonable. It is, it's well located and it's newer, but even still, it is on the lower end.
All right. I thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. Mr. Kupfer, you noted that restaurants are on the low end. What is the range?
I meant that both the 5.8 and the 5.85, I would say for capitalization rates are on the lower end of any office or retail range of comparables for capitalization rates, which is where these types of property generally fall into.
In fact, on retail, it's below the 20th percentile, correct?
That's correct.
For office, it's within that 20 to 80, but on the low end. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I wasn't clear which row you were referring to.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld, whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you. So this is obvious. Burger King and TD on the same site. They must be great for each other's businesses. I don't know how this ever came about, but it happened. And incidentally, the same owner owns the bank next door, which I've forgotten what branch that was. Bank of Montreal, immediately north, and he also owns the apartment block behind. So the lot has been redrawn, resurveyed. And the reason this is a valuation issue is that they're very, very tight for parking. So what they do between the sites is that in the off hours, the apartment dwellers are allowed to use the bank parking, and in the daytime hours, it's vice versa. So there's a bit of a cooperative effort between the properties. So it is tight on the parking. I think that in the long run, that because of this relationship, and they have to put easements on it as well, because you'll note that the block does not have its own private access. in the long run, we're probably dealing with an entire economic unit of the three retail properties up front and the apartment at the back. On its own, this is probably the best part of the site, but it does have the easement on it requiring access to the block. The rents we've used are the actuals, and we've managed this property for years, known the owner for, a long time, almost 20 years, and very familiar with the site. Our brokers here put in the tenants, and we've had the law always looked after it. So the statements are prepared by us, and they're quite accurate. The bottom line is the potential rent is $230,000 a year, and it has grown over time. That's what it is. And the vacancy, we use the same calculation of vacancy. We just looked at retail. Now, Johnson does have a restaurant breakdown on his report. I don't use it because the sample size is very, very low. Like there's 23 million square feet of retail in the city, and of that 364,000 are restaurant. So it's an extremely low sample size, and also impacted by some owner occupants. I think we would prefer to use actual more data that had a greater sample size. In any event, it's the same concept. For retail was 4.7, for Gary 5.1. We get a 4.9, and then the non-recoverables, as well as spoken earlier. The shortfall is much, much higher because the taxes are higher. Now, you can't just simply put in an arbitrary shortfall. Taxes on this site at a $30 rent, in retail world, the assessor's going to say $8 is your shortfall if your rent's $10 or if it's $30. And that's the problem. They don't have a variable on the shortfall. The greatest component of shortfall are paying the taxes, because the tax man doesn't go away when you're vacant. So you must have a higher shortfall for higher rents, and our $30 rents would indicate the reason, the need for that. When we looked at the cap rate and pegged it at 7.25, there were a number of factors. Much like the first one today, it's got a usage easement, and property rights are more vital than anything else. The valuation isn't done of the bricks and mortar or the dirt. It's done of the property rights and what you can put on it. That's the primary use. So we do have some restrictive usages. Our adjustment is small. It simply means that alternative use might be difficult, and a capitalization rate is a forward-looking concept. And what can you do in the future, and how optimistic will you be able on your revenue stream? So there's not as much optimism on this when you're looking forward. It doesn't mean we're looking post-reference. It means today, given what I have, what could I do? Configuration is an issue on this site because it is kind of crammed, and you have two multiple uses. They don't have the greatest offset for operating times. A good mall will have daytime users and evening users, and then try to share the parking in between for utility. That's generally not the case here. So it is a bit on the tight side. It's not a major issue. It's just a little more awkward. And the 0.16 is the major one, I believe. Both these buildings, especially the Burger King, was built to suit. So on alternate use, to walk into a Burger King and think, what can I do with this, and how can I convert it? Your usages are limited. Now the bank has more potential uses because it is just retail space. We think that the income growth potential on this is kind of peaked out because it has been in place for close to 30 years, and it really hasn't seen any growth. What was thought of at the time when it was put in is that Pembina at this point actually has a very narrow market area. On the east, it's governed by the Red River, and on the west it was governed by farmland. Now that farmland ended up being Waverly West, but Waverly West brought in all their own services. So there was some pickup to the retail on Pembina Highway because of Waverly West, but not as much as hoped. So we think it's really tapped out. It doesn't have the greatest potential for growth. These are all minor issues. Now, what we did not factor in was COVID, and if there was a question mark anywhere, and someone said, "Are you too aggressive in your cap rate or not?" I would just remind them that everybody got shut down from COVID. Nobody is buying restaurants. Nobody is investing in restaurants. Some of them are coming back, and that's great, but a lot failed and a lot closed. And the investment world doesn't really want to deal with them now. They'll wait for recovery before they get back involved in it. It used to be said that 9 out of every 10 restaurants failed in the first year, and chain restaurants had a better prospect of survival. COVID saw the demise of several chains, and we operate in a 2-year cycle. So maybe the next 2-year cycle will be more optimism. This 2-year cycle is pessimistic on restaurants. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Kupfer, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. The value generated here, again, this is a collaboration, you and the office team?
Yeah, we had a number of people working on it.
Page 3 of your brief, the budget comparison, the commercial rent roll should come after. Can you explain to me why you went out of your way not to include that?
Pardon me? Which number?
The commercial rent roll that should come after your budget comparison. Can you tell me why you didn't include that?
Commercial rent roll. There may have been changes during the year and not reflective of the fiscal year. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it.
You stated that you're using the actual rents in place and that you manage the property, correct?
That's correct.
After reviewing the commercial rent roll that I've supplied, the one that was sent to the city, would you like to revise your statement?
No, not at all. I'm looking at it and I see there's escalations in it. So we half the period was in the escalation, half the period was post-reference. So
the reference date is April 1st, 2021, correct?
Yes.
What was the rent TD Canada Trust was paying as of the reference date?
They had a step up at that point to $30.50, which extended till 2022.
What was the rent paid by Burger King as of the reference date?
They were at $32.50 as of the reference period on another step.
So even not using the step ups, your rents don't make sense. You're using $29 a foot. Where does that come from?
Well, where that comes from is the statement itself, and if you look on it, page 2, the bottom of page 2, it's the net operating income, $230,000. There were expenses during the year.
The net operating income of $230,214 over the total space. What is you're telling me? That's your calculation?
Yeah, that's correct. That's what I'm using.
Well, even that works out to $29.47. So you took that and then rounded it down?
Yeah, I think it was just a question to get rounding because it's 232.14 and we use 231.91 just to have $30.10 and 29 even. So yeah, we trying to make it look better by $23.
No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
Just one. Mr. Neufeld, there's only one title to the property?
That's correct.
So your evaluation is based on, the total revenue and NOI and the cap rate of 7.25%.
That's correct. It's for both operations.
Would your client ever consider splitting the title in case they wants to sell the property at all?
If it's in this day and age, that's a little more expensive than it used to be. They would be dedication fees, and dedication fees would be on the value of the new land created 10%. And then the city approval system is quite difficult. So if somebody came through with the money to do it, they'd do it. I'm guessing they're probably looking at about a few $100,000 to do something like that. It's not a simple process.
And you said that there was a easement in regards to the parking for the tenants that belong to that apartment block, which is adjacent to this property.
Yeah, this property and the one next door. This all used to be three. This was always three titles, but they were differently shaped. So when they decided to build the block at the rear, they rejigged the shape to allow the apartment block to be 200 feet from the railway line. And I've given you a poor picture. I think the assessor's picture is a bit better. Okay, it doesn't show the railway line, but to get the block in, they had to move the siting of it closer to Pembina Highway. So they brought it closer to Burger King and the TD rather than to Bank of Montreal, because you can see Bank of Montreal is deeper. And that's why they came with this irregular shape. So they got their 200 feet of separation from the rail line and then drew these lines. And there are a total of 4 access points on the site. So then they're all sharing those accesses, including the lot at the rear that has none.
Okay. So, Mr. Newfield, do you think in your evaluation that this would affect the overall value of the property, having easements like that?
Yes, it would, because if you're hypothetically going to sell this lot on its own, you could do. The buyer is going to come in and say, it's a downward pressure on what I'm willing to pay, because with the easement, I'm restricted as to what I can do in my own lot. If I said tomorrow, I think I'd like to have a different building, maybe bulldoze these two and configure it differently, they couldn't do it because they couldn't block any of the access to the existing building. And additionally, they would have restrictions on, could they build it as high as they wanted to? No, not likely, because there's a building in the back. And I haven't read the whole easement, but it's going to cover off a whole series of things you can and can't do. So I think that it would put some downward pressure on the front.
All right, I thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay, and I do not. Mr. Kupfer, is there a desire for summation?
I would just like to again say that the modeled rents, the net operating income in place, very accurately reflect what's been reported to us, and I believe the assessment should be maintained.
Thank you, Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, in all these properties, it's what I said in the beginning. There's nothing special about a bank. There's no reason that it has to be penalized by high cap rates or low vacancy rates or rents that are impacted by TI. It's just retail, and treat it like retail. And I think that's the message. That's what the market would do with this. These buildings come on the market. The next user won't necessarily be a bank. It'd be a fitness studio or any bridal shop. It could be anything. That's the nature of real estate, the adaptability, and it's a double-edged sword. If you think it's restricted use for a bank, then you have a dwindling market. And if you think it's retail, then you have to consider all the retail. And I think what we've done, and we've chosen to call it retail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. That concludes item number 9 on our agenda. So we've heard all items today, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Kupfer, and thank you, Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you.